If upgrades are necessary, the applicant shall be responsible for all costs associated with said upgrades. The next, concern pertaining to traffic in regard to the amount of accesses via Linder Road in this area, combined with not enough access and interconnectivity in the adjacent development to the south, Whitestone Estates, with only one way in and one way out. Key issues of discussion by the commission. They were in favor of the proposed two-story rather than three-story structures, as they're more compatible with adjacent residential and commercial structures. The inclusion of this site in the adjacent development and common open space and site amenities proposed for the overall development. Parking in excess of UDC standards and provision of a pedestrian connection to the north. The commission made the following change to the staff recommendation. They modified condition B1-2 in section 9 as requested by the applicant with the language recommended by staff that I previously covered. There are no outstanding issues for council, and there has been no written testimony received since the commission hearing. Staff will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Sonia. Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Kavanagh.
Sonia, that proposed change B1-2, the applicant shall be responsible to determine whether adequate capacity exists. I'm struggling with that. I guess, to me, shouldn't the Public Works Department determine that and not the applicant? And shouldn't we have some basis for determining what that is?
Mr. Mayor, one would think. It's not my condition, it's Public Works' condition. They're the one that proposed the language, so I assume that they have a route to accomplish that meets their satisfaction.
Perhaps the applicant maybe can speak to that, but that's at least to frame the conversation. Oh.
We have Mr. Dolsby on the line. Perhaps he could weigh in on this topic for us.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Kavanagh. So what we would do is we would have the applicant come up with the total extent of their development, the anticipated flow that would go through the development. We'd give them information on those two lift stations. They would determine whether they think they were going to impact the capacity or overwhelm the capacity of the stations, but any analysis that they conduct would be thoroughly reviewed by Public Works and approved prior to acceptance. And that's kind of what the condition was, is they would propose their plan, we would review it and concur with it before we move forward.
They do the work and we verify it.
Correct.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
doesn't it seem appropriate to just add to that condition then, so it's super clear that it should be approved by Public Works to their satisfaction or something? I kind of follow what Councilman Kavanagh is saying.
You should have the tiebreaker.
Mr. Mayor? Councilman Burnt.
Sonia, is there a rendering that shows how this project will look with the existing house on the property? If I'm remembering correctly, and I haven't been by that on that road for a while, but it seems like it's sort of skinny, and that house takes up a lot of space, if I'm remembering correctly. I just would like to know what that looks like.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Burnt, Council, the site plan before you shows the footprint of the existing home. However, I have no renderings or photos of the existing home.
Council, any additional questions for staff at this time? Okay. Do we have the applicant with us in the room or online today? It looks like he's in the room today. Stuart, if you could state your name and address for the record, and you'll be recognized for 15 minutes.
Either one of these work? Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Jim Jewett, 776 East Riverside Drive, Suite 204, Eagle, Idaho. This is in addition to our existing 12 Oaks project. This was contemplated some time back. Just took some time to get to this point. The existing phase is 98% complete, and we're starting occupancy there. We are sharing all the common areas we have within the original project was pool, clubhouse, tot area and a half-court basketball court. When we started this well over a year ago, we did consult with Public Works, submitted our plan to them of flowing to the existing sewer station, and we got their tentative approval on that. But any final design, they have to approve. So we're comfortable with any language you put in there, realizing that Public Works has to eventually approve whatever we propose. On Sonia's slide, she did show three-story buildings. We're not proposing any three-story buildings in this phase. They're all the two-story buildings. We only had 2 three-story buildings on the far west end of the existing 12 Oaks. So the buildings to the left would be the only buildings you'd see in this phase. There was a question about the existing house. I didn't quite get the question, so if somebody could redirect the question to me, maybe I can help answer it. With that, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Councilman Burr.
Thank you, Jim. I just would like to know what that house is gonna look like, that's gonna be existing. It's not a small house, if I'm remembering correctly. And if I'm remembering correctly, this is just barely south of that commercial corner where I think there's a C-store, a gas station, Arctic Circle, I believe. Am I thinking about the same corner?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Commissioner, or Council, sorry, member. Yes, it's just directly south of the Arctic Circle. It's not an overly large house. The garage sits underneath it, and then it sits above. There's a bunch of outbuildings that make it seem much larger, but they're all being torn down. So the only thing remain will be the existing home, which is not very large. It sits approximately 30 feet off of Linder Road.
Yeah.
So our buffer almost reaches the front of the house. No, I hope that answers your questions. But it's shown in the footprint, and it fits in with all the parking and everything that we have proposed.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Burr.
The reason why you're wanting to leave that there, are you gonna rent it out to someone? Is it gonna be a rental property, or?
It's more of my pet peeves. I just don't like to tear things down that have some value to them, that some potential use down in the future. We certainly can't. It's because the way it's tucked in, we can't build any more buildings there new, and it would serve well as either a rental unit and or a manager's unit, because with the addition of these 64 units, we'll be up to 172, I believe, or 174, I can't remember. And that warrants an on-site manager, and that possibly we could give them a little better facilities than one of our apartments. I mean, it can be tore down as well. I just don't like to see the things go to the dump. It's just kind of a personal thing.
Councilman Cavender.
Thanks, Mr. Jewett. Appreciate you being here tonight. I was hoping you might provide council some comments related to the concern that was voiced at P&Z about the traffic in this project could potentially generate. And we've got a lot of multifamily in and around this area. I don't get really excited about a lot of multifamily that doesn't have close access, and this doesn't have that. So if you can help me understand why this project makes sense there, being this high density, and maybe speak to some of the concerns that you heard from planning and zoning.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Cavender. Most of their traffic-related questions were specifically to Linder Road, and I indicated to them that Linder Road access would be a right-in, right-out only. We have a full access on Franklin Road, and we have a cross-access easement into the commercial area of Hark's Corner, which is on the corner, and it has a full access as well. I developed that when I did the commercial phase of this project a couple of years ago. So it actually has 3 access points, and only one is restricted to a right-in, right-out, and that would be Linder Road. You know, the proximity to the freeway, the new 10-mile off-ramp is about 1.75 miles to the east, or west, sorry. Meridian exits maybe 1.75 miles to 2 miles to the west. I think that has considerably good access to the freeway, being 2 exits within 2 miles either direction. And then with the eventual widening of Linder Road and a new overpass over Linder Road, there will be another access point going south across the freeway that will be able to access those same 2 interstates off-ramps. So from a transportation point, I really would, Franklin is 4 lanes already. It is not overtaxed. It's easy to get out, for me at least, to get out on the Franklin Road. We haven't started to put residents in here yet, so we can see how that traffic flows, but the roads all warrant the traffic flow based on HHG's staff report, and the restriction on Linder is primarily because of its proximity to the commercial exit that's just on our north boundary of that east entrance.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Mr. So what I'm hearing though is the only access off of Linder is a right in, right out, correct?
That is correct.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
could you help me understand one of your residents wants to come to City Hall. I understand they'd have to take a right out on Linder Road and then flip a U-E somewhere along Linder?
No, they would simply go through the existing 12 Oaks Phase 1 and exit on the Franklin Road as a right-hand turn.
Okay. Thank you.
All of our facilities, mailboxes will all be located, even for this project, within Phase 1 next to the pool and clubhouse.
Okay.
So we see, in the way we designed the first phase, our main road coming into the crossroad has no access of apartments off of it. They go off onto other parking lots. So it is more of a collector-type road, anticipating the future growth that we've proposed here.
Council, any additional questions for the applicant?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
Jim, back on the questions with regards to condition B12 and the proposed language. The council's brought up some concerns that we might want to flesh out a little more. So if this proposed language were to proceed, what ultimately happens if it sounds like maybe you'd be agreeable to the analysis being done by you provided to the city, and if the city determines in its review and ultimate decision that there is not adequate capacity, the draft says the costs are borne by you of any upgrades, but what happens? Let's say that, what if there's a disagreement between you and the city? And second, what if you or whoever owns this project just doesn't want to pay for any upgrades?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Borton. Like I stated in my testimony earlier, when we started this phase of the project, we went to the city and said, how would you like us to service this, going to the west or under the master plan going to the north? And they asked us to submit our flows, which we did, and the engineering department reviewed it and got back to us saying that there was adequate flow within the system to handle the additional flow that we would propose. That was a tentative based on our plan a year and a half ago. Our plan hasn't changed. So when they came back with the language at P&Z, adding the responsibility for us to do the analysis for us would be simply to provide to them our flows. And they would then address their own lift station as whether or not there's capacity within it, which they already have commented a year and a half ago saying there is. But with our final plan, they'll do a final analysis, and if there is any potential upgrades, that's something we have to review. The option outside of that is simply go back to the master plan and go to the north, and I just don't think that that's really what the Public Works nor the City Engineering Department wants at this point in time. I think we all recognize that those lift stations that are currently in Whitestone will go away with the development of the Brighton property to our direct west. I think that's the eventual goal anyway, is the lift station to go away. So I'm comfortable with the language. I'm comfortable that we've already had enough dialogue with Public Works, and we're confident of what we proposed, and that it will all work out. So I'm okay with the language as written. I recognize that we have to get our final approval from Public Works when we submit a final engineering plan.
Mr. Mayor, follow up?
Councilman Borton?
But that begs the question of the city's comfort, even with the proposed language, and the question of what occurs if you disagree. You use the words, we would review the city's decision, but it sounded like the way it would be applied is the city makes a determination that upgrades are necessary, and that's it. And those upgrades either get paid for by the developer or everything comes to a grinding halt. If it's not that, I guess I just don't want a condition to be loose with good intentions. It should be drafted assuming there's a problem, so it has the certainty. I think other council members have expressed some concern that there's some certainty in not only who has the ultimate decision, but also whatever the consequence might be if there's a disagreement.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Borton, I don't know if I can fully answer your question, although I understand it. I guess it's not like any other condition that will be placed upon this or any project in town. It's just a condition that has to be met before the project can move forward. Like I've stated, I feel very confident in that the capacity exists because we have emails from the city engineer stating that it does.
Sure.
And so I guess we could, if we want to clean up that language, we could simply ask Public Works to further their study to determine exactly if there's any requirements to be made of us beyond the vagueness of if any, and then put that into some conditions of approval. I'm completely okay with that. I can understand and appreciate not having a loose end out there. I just can only reiterate that I'm comfortable with what the language states because I believe we've done the research already, and that we're at a point where I believe that the capacity does exist.
Mr. Mayor.
So,
Councilman Borton, did you have a follow-up?
not at this time. Thanks.
Councilman Schrader?
I would like the applicant's feedback if the condition actually said, the applicant shall do, the appropriate analysis requested by the Public Works Department, and the Public Works Department shall approve their sewer upgrades and associated, whatever you call that, in their absolute discretion. Can you live with that? Because I really feel like that's kind of what we need is it should be in their discretion to approve whatever you're proposing.
Can we have Clint come back up? And again, if you can give your best viewpoint on this situation to help bring clarity for all and what you think needs to exist.
Sure. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, what we would need is, as Mr. Jewett had referenced, if you would just submit a final flow. We've got the language in there in case, because there could be changes in the development before we reach this stage, because it was a year and a half ago when we took an initial analysis of it and worked with Mr. Jewett and his engineer and came up with a plan that looked like it could service to the existing Whitestone lift station, which then pumps to the landing lift station, both of which will be abandoned once Brighton's development gets there. But he did submit a flow, we analyzed it, and we double-checked to make sure it would work. So what we'd request is he would submit an updated plan with an updated flow. We would check the calculations that went into the flow, also check the lift station with the flow monitoring data that we have, and check that to see if there's any upgrades required at that lift station, and any upgrades that would be required as a result of the flow for his development, or that may be required, not would be borne by the developer. So we would get a flow from him. We would review the current lift station design and flows and see if there's upgrades required, which the preliminary analysis we did a year and a half ago, as Mr. Jewett referenced, indicated that there wouldn't be upgrades required. But we wanted the discretion to complete a secondary analysis now that we have final flows, so that if there are upgrades that are required, they're borne by the developer. That's why the condition's there.
Mr. Jewett, do you concur with that description as outlined by staff?
Completely, yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton?
a question for Clint. Just walk us through the process. What if you run that course and the city says an upgrade is necessary and it comprises 1, 2, and 3? So developer, you have to do 1, 2, and 3. At what stage in the process does that occur? And what happens until those upgrades occur? I mean, is it a stop, no permits, and everything's on hold until there's compliance?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Borton, that would be my recommendation.
And Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton?
it gets in the weeds a little bit, but that's the question. And for Mr. Neri perhaps as well, but just trying to understand in that unlikely or unfortunate circumstance, what actually happens. And so it's clear for the developer too, whether it's a recommendation that occurs or it is a certainty that is a consequence. It's not a discretionary call, but it is a contractual commitment that's the consequence. Just trying to understand, however a condition like this gets drafted, that it's crystal clear if there's some need for us to protect a concern, then to ensure that the city has certainty in its remedy to make sure the concern gets addressed. That was some of the reasoning for my question. So I don't know if that's a question for you, Clint, or for Mr. Neri.
Well, Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Neri?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I mean, I guess from what I've been listening to and I understanding the condition, I mean, it is tied to occupancy. So I wasn't sure if Mr. Borton was concerned that either Mr. Jewett or a future owner of the property just wouldn't build it, so then it would sort of stifle the project. But it's certainly tied to occupancy, and the city has to give final approval of the plans. I don't foresee any issue in the city's control of the sewer system upgrade. It's the issue of whether it stalls out, and Mr. Jewett's maybe not the owner, someone else is, and they don't want to make that level of investment, and it sort of stalls the project. I think that's always a risk that exists in any project, but I don't foresee any other issues that once it's tied to occupancy, you're going to have to build it if you want to put people in the building. So.
Okay, thank you.
Council, any further questions for the applicant? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jewett. This is a public hearing. Did we have everyone sign up to testify on this item?
Mr. Mayor, we did not.
Okay. Is there anybody who in the audience who would like to testify on this item, or anybody online? If you're online, you'd like to testify, please indicate so by raising your hand in the Zoom app. I see nobody who would like to testify in either location. So would the applicant like any final comments?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council. If it alleviates some additional concern about the lift station, I would propose that we just add an additional change to the DA, having a condition in there that any occupant of this phase requires Public Works' sign off on any proposed or needed upgrades to the lift station.
Thank you. Council, any further questions for the applicant on that topic or anything else?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Burr.
So, along with what's been stated by my fellow council members in regard to the flows and, my only other concern would be the existing home. And I know I spoke about it before, but I just wanted to be clear. According to our flume, one of the uses of this proposed development would be multifamily, residential may be allowed in some cases, but should be careful to promote a high quality of life through thoughtful site design, connectivity, and amenities. And so I struggle with the fact that you want to build this nice, big, beautiful complex. And I'm familiar with it. I drive past it every day, and it's nice, it's pretty. But you want to leave this ugly house in the front of it. And for what? So just for it to be a rental. And in my opinion, I just don't know how that fits with the overall view of what the intended use would be for that area. I don't know if I'm going to, if this is so important to me that I'm willing to deny the project. I'm not saying that, but like, I just think that, you know, there's so many other creative and cool things that you could do with that would be beneficial to those who would be living at this complex, other than having a big ugly house sitting in the front of it.
Councilman Byrne, is it the aesthetics of it, if it were to match the rest of the property, or is it the fact that it exists in and of itself?
Maybe both. I don't know. I just think that maybe mostly the aesthetics, I guess. But I think that I think there's a higher and better use for that you know, that. I mean, I just don't understand why you're spending millions of dollars on this beautiful project and this really nice project, and you're leaving an existing home right smack dab in the front of it. I just don't. Help me understand that.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Byrne, I have no objections to having the house removed. Again, it was kind of my preference, but I certainly don't want to make it that big of an issue. So if the council wants to motion to have it stricken and removed as part of the project, I'm okay with that.
And I appreciate that. And I'm one of 6, and so there's other opinions that we'll for sure discuss it. But would you be opposed to putting another amenity there that the residents could enjoy? And I don't know what that would look like, but just.
I mean, that would be something we'd have to explore. I mean, it is a limited area. We did design around it. We could probably create some additional open space, possibly some additional parking. There was some discussion of that. So, we would, if it's the desire of this council that I remove the building, we would find an alternative use for that, where there'd be a balance of additional open space and or additional parking.
Thanks, Jim. Again, I'm one of 6, so we'll for sure discuss it. And I may be the lone wolf, so you might be okay. We'll see.
I've had other people voice the same concern, so you're not alone. It's just maybe on this count, I don't know, but,
all right.
But I'm okay.
Thanks, Jim.
Council, any other comments or questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
I think Councilman Burns hit on something, and that might be one of maybe several ways to address that concern, and I know it came up in P and Z as well, is this is designated commercial, and at least the way the comp plan reads, it tries to provide some direction that it seems to really limit to somewhat special circumstances the application of multifamily residential, and I know that there was concern expressed getting rid of commercial and putting multifamily here. And so when you look at the benchmark that the comp plan tries to provide of how high quality of life, thoughtful site design, connectivity, and amenities, I struggle with this one as well in light of, does it clear the bar to warrant eliminating its planned commercial use? And we just did the comp plan in this area, didn't change for whatever reason. So that, I just wanted to put that out there while you're there, Jim, and see if you had any unique comment on if this rises to that higher standard. It's kind of like the exception for what would otherwise not be allowed in a commercial, or at least not intended to be put into a commercial planned area.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Morton, I will try to answer your question the best that I understood it. So under the comp plan, this is designated as commercial, and we're proposing this residential. We actually considered putting right on the frontage there, commercial, but the problem is tying it in with the existing commercial. We have one cross access with Hark's Corner, and the staff is recommending that be a pedestrian access only, no vehicle access. So trying to do a commercial project in there with having to access solely onto Linder Road is problematic in itself, and it is not wise. The nature of this ground and how it flows into our existing project flows much better than it would be into the Hark's Corner projects, which leads to our design versus the commercial. So there is an option that we can still put some sort of limited commercial on that where the house is now, small office building. I don't think retail would be suitable simply because of the limited access on Linder Road. I think the comp plan clearly allows for the TNR zoning within the commercial designation, which is what we're asking for, which allows this use. I'm sure I'm not answering all of your questions, Councilman Borden, but the way we evaluated this was what was existing on the ground with Hark's Corner and how further interconnectivity with it just didn't make a lot of sense for us, and that's why commercial wasn't looked at very hard on this piece because of the lack of interconnectivity. So I hope I have answered your questions. If not, I guess you could redirect and I'll try to answer again.
No, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Borton.
I think you did. I just wanted to give you a chance I wanted to let you know the concern at least and give you a chance to speak to it. So I appreciate that. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions or comments, or do I have a motion? Councilman Kavanagh.
I'll at least get things going. I move that we close the public hearing for the villas at 12 Oaks, H-2020-0014. Second.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
council, I think we've touched on a 3 or 4 different things, on this application. A couple of which I'm not super comfortable editing or modifying on the fly. Councilman Byrne, I think you hit the nail on the head about that house. To me, that was an ideal location. I looked at this for an amenity. Sounds like the applicant is open to moving that house, but I would feel much more comfortable being supportive of this project when I know what that is. Frankly, I'd like to see commercial there. I've got some real concerns overall just with the access of this high-density residential. I shared my concerns about putting multifamily. I think 2 miles away from freeway access is not ideal to me. Again, I may be alone on that one. I like the term lone wolf. That's good, Councilmember Burns. I like that term. And then ultimately, I mean, we've talked around this condition B1-2. There's been a couple of suggestions on that. Like, I get uneasy wordsmithing some of that stuff on the fly and would feel much more comfortable to allow staff to work with the applicant, shore that condition up, something that we can all be comfortable with. So I'm not supportive of approving this tonight. I'd like to continue it for a later point in time to get some of these other issues addressed. I'm not sure how all the rest of you feel, but I think that's maybe the right direction to head.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burr.
I couldn't agree more with Councilman Cavanagh. I think it would be important to give Mr. Jewett some direction as well, with the continuance, if that's what the rest of council is wanting.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Strader.
I'm tracking along the same lines. I think it would be wise to see the applicant come back with a better fleshed out maybe design plan or something to modify what's going on with the house, either proposing an amenity or commercial. We should probably discuss that if we have a common view. I think that would help the applicant significantly in how to move forward. I do have just a general concern, which is, yeah, we're so reliant on residential in general as a city. We're really trying to develop our commercial, and it seems like the more we sort of float, if that's the right terminology, these designations, I get concerned about that. The more we do that, that is an underlying concern. I do think that the apartments themselves seem fairly thought out in terms of design, but I'm kind of looking for more. I personally would like to see commercial if it's viable. The applicant's saying it's really not. I have to listen to that as well. But at least I'd love to see some type of an amenity for the residents there, and I'll kind of defer to the rest of council on what we'd rather see in that spot.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Burr.
I think Councilman Borton and Councilwoman Strader bring up some great points about the commercial aspect of this project. If the desire of this council to lean that direction, with all due respect to Mr. Jewett, I would hate for him to put forth more resources toward a redesign of a residential project when this council would prefer the existing designation to stay commercial. So, in my opinion, if it's the desire of this council to keep it commercial, I think we owe it to Mr. Jewett to let him know that now, instead of having him spend a lot of time and resources trying to figure out what a residential component would be.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Strader.
I can only speak for myself. I don't know where everyone else's heads are at. I am leaning that direction. Personally, I would prefer it to be commercial. I'm concerned about how much we're floating residential. I don't think it makes a ton of sense for the city as a whole to be having that as a regular practice. But I'm realistic, and if that's not where the rest of council's at, I'd rather see a modification to it, but that's my preference.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
I tend to agree with Councilman Cavanagh and Councilman Strader on that point as well. And I think Councilman Burn's advice is sound, that let's make sure the applicant is aware. If that's one of the most fundamental concerns, then we don't want to waste anyone's time. And so that's one of my fundamental concerns as well, commercial.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
yeah, I've sat here, listened to my colleagues bring up some good points. Need to take a look at that commercial. There might be some access issues, is the only thing I see, but I think it's worth taking a look at and making sure everything's spelled out before we move forward on this, and see how this property can develop to its highest and best use here.
So council, your public hearing is closed. I don't know if you want to reopen the public hearing and hear from the applicant about the council's desire for commercial or continuance, or if you want to make your own decision based on what you've heard to this point so far.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Cavanagh.
I'm always a fan, we're always, I think, a fan collectively of allowing the public to testify, whether it's the applicant or members of the public. I have no issues if we want to reopen the public hearing. If the applicant would want to share any comments before we close and potentially make a motion. So, Mr. Mayor, I move that we reopen the public hearing for the Villas at 12 Oaks H-2020-0014.
Second.
I have a motion, a second, to reopen the public hearing. Is there a discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Mr. Jewett, would you like to come up and provide some comments on what you've heard the discussion?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So if I heard everything correctly, there's a sentiment of wanting this to remain commercial. Would that be in its entirety, or would there be some middle ground of making part of it commercial and part of it residential or apartments?
That's Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Borton.
That's a tough one, I think, to answer. It's a fair question, but a tough one to answer. It's, you know it when you see it. So it depends, which is not a very helpful answer. I think it's accurate, but not helpful. Wouldn't even know if there's a way to blend both. You would be able to know that best, but understanding that there's this pretty strong consensus that commercial needs to be involved in this property. If that means there's some small portion that remains residential and it's still a viable project and it makes sense, I don't know if anyone would prohibit you, because you would probably be able to articulate, here's why this makes sense, to incorporate this small part of residential. So I don't know if I could give you a better answer than it depends, but it depends.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, let me redirect you to our original 12 Oaks phase, which I developed 5 commercial lots within that phase. You'll represent on the drawing here to the west, the top left corner, northwest corner is 1 lot, and to the northeast corner is 4 lots. So our overall project already has a considerable amount of commercial that we've added to the existing Harsh corner, and then one that will have interconnectivity to Brighton's commercial project to our direct west. If we added another commercial lot over off of Linder Road where the existing home sits, I think that that's a considerable amount of commercial we've added into the overall project. I will point out that of our 5 commercial lots that we've done in the existing phase, none of them are built on yet. There is a struggling market in the commercial world right now, specifically from COVID. And we're hoping that does rebound at some point in time. But we don't know that for sure. So from a financial component, which I realize it's not total bearing on how you guys make your decision, a complete commercial project would just simply financially not be feasible from our point of view, because I feel like we'd just be adding more development into an already saturated situation. But I wouldn't be objectionable to adding the commercial along Linder Road. That's an easy change. We simply remove the house and add a commercial pad, not unlike what we have in our our northwest corner. And from a preference point of view, I would rather rent to a business than rent to an individual. We find it less difficult, but simply just not what the market bears for us today. Apartments are in demand. I know there's a lot of them have been developed in the city, and I feel like there's a lot more coming as our population grows. We are in an area that's conducive to walking to the commercial that exists within Harks Corner, which is beneficial to them, adding our additional residential units. We're not taxing any of the services because we're on existing, well-traveled, well-maintained, and well-built roads. So I'm agreeable to making an amenity change. I'm agreeable to adding some commercial in the front and even potentially even moving it farther back. The one thing that we would have to address with staff is we only have one cross-access with Harks Corner, and it exists in that northerly west corridor there. And the staff right now is recommending that to be pedestrian only. Cross-access easements is essential when it comes to commercial, and the lack of that would be detrimental from the physical point of trying to construct it. So I'm not objectionable to some sort of continuance to facilitate some changes. Obviously, I would ask for guidance of how you would want that to change. I still believe that we've put a lot of time and thought into this, and we believe that because of our existing project, the interconnectivity to it, the amenities we provided within the initial project, and the commercial that we provided in the initial project, we have adequately addressed the comp plan's desire to have commercial in this area. But I'm here to listen to your guidance and try to address it as best I can. I hope that answered the question.
Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, one wrinkle, and again, I don't know how long a continuance is being anticipated, but what was noticed for this project is a DA amendment, annexation, TNR zoning, which does allow commercial, but no one's noticed commercial as a part of this project. So it's never been discussed publicly of a commercial. So amenities to the existing residential would be one thing. Adding a commercial component is another. So if you're going to continue, you're going to have to renotice it differently because it has never been proposed to be a commercial project with commercial users. I don't know if that's going to require subdivision of the property, which isn't proposed either. Likely would. So that's another component that would have to be noticed. So just as if you're going to move to continue, it may take a little longer than 2 weeks or 3 weeks, because now with notification, drawing of a preliminary plat now, finding type of user configuration that would fit there may take a little longer. That's a little bit more significant amendment than what was originally proposed.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, it might just take us all the way back to the beginning because we would have to have the neighborhood meeting process to identify a plat. A plat would start us back, I mean, that in itself would start us back at the beginning.
So I guess, Mr. Neri, from a process standpoint, what is the best process way to move forward? Have the applicant withdraw this application? Have council act on this application?
Well, Mr. Mayor, and maybe Sonia can weigh in as well. It seems to me, I mean, based upon that, at the minimum, we have to remand it back to planning and zoning. The only issue is the neighborhood meeting component, normally is done prior to planning and zoning. So I'm not sure if this is a complete do-over, if we're gonna now add a commercial component to this that didn't previously exist because of that. So I don't know if Sonia has a opinion on that. Otherwise, normally a remand is sufficient, but I don't know that that's adequate from the preliminary plat point.
Mr. Mayor, Council, yes, Mr. Neri is correct. A neighborhood meeting is required, typically before submittal of the application. However, this would impact the neighbors, to the south and east. So I think it's a good idea to reach out to them. And yes, I feel it should be remanded back to the commission if we switch tracks in the middle of the stream. It's gonna require new legal descriptions, a subdivision plat. It's a new project. And just for clarification, I heard something mentioned earlier about, floating residential to this property. Residential, multifamily, and the TNR zoning is actually a desired use in the commercial designation. So this isn't a request for a float. It is a, allowed use. Of course, that use is subject to council approval. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council. If the desire of the council is to go a different direction, a denial still leaves the option to come back, which is essentially what I'm going to do anyway. But at least I don't think we would be in favor of all commercial, especially in today's atmosphere. So I would respectfully request that you take as much as you can of my plan with some direction of how you want it to be changed and consider that. And if it's just something outside the realm, I think that I'll have to accept your poison, I guess. But I think that our project is well thought out, and I think it does blend well with our existing project. We have provided commercial. So I would just respectfully request that you give me the direction how this project could be approved instead of that significant of amount of change going back to all commercial.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Burr.
Well, first off, Jim, thank you for listening, and thank you for being open to coming up with the best possible solution. I appreciate that. Looking at this, just at this property that's up on the screen right now, the frontage along Linder is pretty skinny. It's not, there's not a lot of frontage there, which would be the prime portion for a commercial component. Because of that, I think that where I stand would probably make that front northeast corner commercial, and then I would be okay with leaving the rest of it residential. Ultimately, I never had any problem with the development itself. I understand my colleagues' concerns. My only concern was that front portion that we discussed. So that would be my take. If that helps you out a little bit, Jim, we'll see what everyone else says.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Brent, I think I've already testified that would be an okay solution for me. I believe that can be done within the DA and the DA mod. We could make some modifications to the DA that front corner be commercial in nature, and it can be part of our overall project and not be part of a plat. If we did want to eventually plat it off for separate ownership, we could do that at a later date. So I believe conditions of approval and modifications to the DA could address that being commercial without having to go back. It's because the commercial use is I guess I'm speaking out of turn so much for the city attorney, I guess, because commercial was not part of our original application to our neighbors, and I do have to be respectful to them. But that's still a dilemma. I do appreciate, and I'm agreeable to those scenarios. If somebody just lays out the process for me to get there, if that's the wish of the entire council, then that's the direction I'll go.
Mr. Mayor? And
Councilman Burr.
that might be the easiest thing we're talking about is the process. We got some, experienced folks that can talk to you about the process here.
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Jim, would it be acceptable at this juncture, since you're not clear what commercial would go there, how that would look, how to configure that with the street and flow, all of that, that simply be designated as open space with a potential for future commercial, which would then require to come back for development amendment?
Completely.
And then that way you could, if the rest of the project is acceptable, basically what you would be designating is that's going to be open space with the ability for Mr. Jewett to request a modification to the DA at a future time if he decides commercial would be there. Now, if commercial isn't viable from his perspective, then it's going to be open space. If it is viable, then he can come back and do that without starting over at the beginning. The risk to the city or the risk to the council, if you're concerned, is that it ends up being open space and doesn't end up being any commercial at all in that location. But it would be then an amenity to the property. But I think he said, would probably be some additional parking and open space. So that's an option to not have to start over completely. And it would still require you to come back with whatever the plan is at that point in time that a commercial is a viable option for that location. So that's an option for you to consider.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Burr.
I would just open it up to my fellow council members to get their opinion on that. My personal opinion would be this should, if we were going to change, just do it right. But, I'm interested to see what everyone else is thinking.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Borton.
I just think it's too far afield. I appreciate the efforts, but I'm just not supportive of it. I don't think it gets to where we need to be.
Mr. Mayor?
Council Cavanagh.
Jimmy, I know you've been doing this a long time, but it comes back to, I think, what Councilmember Borton said. It's that it depends factor. You've got 6 people up here with different perspectives. I'm one that I think that there would need to be a little bit more of a commercial component than just that northeast corner. So I really applaud the city attorney. I always try and figure out a way that we can get to the yes, and would hate to have you go back through this process again. But personally, for me, and again, this is what was into Councilmember Burnt shared his perspective and his opinion. Mine's a little bit different. I would want to see probably a smaller multifamily footprint and a larger commercial footprint.
Just to help the applicant out, Council Cavanagh, there's 8 buildings.
Oh, sure, Mr.
Or buildings instead of 8. Is that your?
And Mr. Mayor, I think it really comes back to what's presented before us, and I kind of touched earlier. I hate kind of building stuff on the fly. I think, you're put my back against the wall, I think you probably lose two buildings. Your two, I guess those are easterly buildings. And I think that preserves a little bit larger commercial application along Linder. And this is me just kind of looking to the future. And while Linder Road isn't connected now, it will be one day. And you could see this area looking a lot like what I see, at like Linder and Shinden. You've got this kind of robust commercial component there, with different types of retail and restaurants. I know we hear this all the time about ice cream. We got ice cream already at Arctic Circle. There's other applications that we can put there or could go there. So that's more where I'm looking at is what this piece of property could be 20 years from now.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cedar.
I think I share the view. It's hard to pick a number of buildings. I'm really struggling with kind of like choosing that. I think for me, 2 would be like the bare minimum. I'd much rather see 3 or even half the project, knowing what's going to happen along Linder is going to be pretty significant in the future. Nothing in life is guaranteed. I totally appreciate the economic aspect of this for you as a developer. Unfortunately, that's kind of an equity risk, and we're trying to make decisions for the long term of the city. So for me, 2 of the buildings would be the minimum. That would at least feel like a significant or more significant portion is commercial. I can't commit to that until I see a plan, and see that it makes sense. So, I mean, that's kind of a given. I wish I had more precise feedback for you. I'm sure we'll do whatever process we can to try to strike the right balance and make sure the public has adequate, notice and so forth. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I apologize.
Mr. Mayor, I want to point out again some of the constructive barriers we have. The only cross-access easement we have currently with Hark's Corner is the one to the north and west. There is no other cross-access easement with any of Hark's Corner from there to Linder Road. So developing a commercial project clearly on one access off of Linder Road with potential cross-access with the apartments would be it. There would be no additional cross-access with Hark's Corner. And I don't think I've ever seen a project where you can't interconnect your commercial projects. That is a barrier. There's an 8-foot concrete wall currently that exists between this property and Hark's Corner. So if I did develop the front half, staff would have to change their opinion on whether or not that access is full access or just pedestrian, and then we would somehow have to figure out how to get the commercial through one access point, and then somehow talk Hark's Corner into letting us tear down an 8-foot concrete wall that exists there now. And Hark's Corner now is owned by, I think, 5 or 6 different property owners, no longer one. So I'm dealing with 6 council people, 6 different property owners. You get my, and I'm the lone wolf. So I'm sitting here saying I don't know where I would go with that. And even if I lose 2 buildings and go to commercial, I think that the city attorney has made it very clear that that would have to go back and start from the beginning. I'd have to notice the neighbors again. That is a significant change from what I will propose to them.
Council, one thing that if we do go back and have to redo this through the all the process, I would suggest the council to waive the applicant's fees for those costs, so they don't have to bear that to make that sort of modifications or go back. So something for you to consider.
Mr. Mayor, may I suggest the following? Allow me a continuance to discuss it with Harks Corner, to see if I can gain another cross access. I think it's imperative that we have that in that east end. So let me talk to specifically Jackson's, to see if I can get that. And then if I can obtain that, let me discuss internally with our staff how we feel about moving two buildings and configure some buildings there. Come back to you with that concept, and if it's something that's acceptable, we can then be remanded back. If I may suggest that give me some chance to figure out a few of these questions.
Mr. Mayor?
Council Cavanagh.
Jim, I think that sounds really reasonable. It gives us a chance to kind of see what you're bringing forth before you don't get too far ahead of your skis. I'm good with that.
How long would you like to pursue? A month?
So what is your month from now hearing date? Make sure it's not a conflict for me being out of town.
Mr. Mayor, if we have to notice it, then we're out till August 4th, and frankly, as far as the hearing goes, we're out till August 4th anyway. But anything beyond, starting at August 4th and beyond is pretty open.
So,
Mr. Mayor?
August 11th?
Excuse me?
August 11th?
I'm actually gone, but I'm here the 4th.
Okay.
But I'm gone on the 11th.
Council Cavanagh.
Mr. Mayor, I think August 4th is National Night Out, or I don't know.
No, it is not.
Oh, okay.
It's been canceled until October this year,
Okay.
if it will even be held then. If our deputy chief knows the actual date, council might benefit from hearing that. Or I can look, but we can follow up off.
Unfortunately, I don't.
So would August 4th work? Is there a motion that we'd want to do continues to that point in time?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Cavanagh.
I guess, Mr. Mayor, we're just going to continue the public hearing, leave it open.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Councilman Cavanagh, right, we talked about commercial, but we're not noticing commercial, we're noticing a conversation. So I think just the continuance is adequate.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we continue this public hearing for H 2020-0014 to August 4th.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to continue the public hearing until August 4th. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we will continue that to August 4th. Council, before we go into our last item, we're going to go ahead and take a recess until 7:45. Okay, council, even though I don't see Mr. Borton yet, we're gonna go ahead and call us back in from recess. Up next is item 6E, public hearing continued from June 9th, 2020 for Cedar Brook Subdivision, H 2020-0012. I will turn this over to Sonia for staff comments.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, just a moment here, okay. The next application before you is a request for annexation and zoning and a preliminary plat. This site consists of 118.58 acres of land. It's zoned RUT in Ada County and is located at 4185 South Linder Road. The comprehensive plan future land use map designation on the property is medium density residential, which calls for 3 to 8 dwelling units per acre. Annexation of a total of 118.58 acres of land with R2 zoning, which consists of 9.48 acres of the site, R4 zoning, which consists of 65.45 acres, and R8 zoning, which consists of 43.66 acres, consistent with the medium-density residential future land use designation. A preliminary plat is proposed that has been revised since the original submittal. It's on the right there, consisting of 328 buildable lots for single-family residential detached homes, 39 common lots, and 4 other lots on 118.58 acres of land is proposed. The minimum lot size proposed is 4,881 square feet with an average lot size of 9,874 square feet. The gross density is 2.77 units per acre with a net density of 4.4 units per acre. The subdivision is proposed to develop in 7 phases as shown on the phasing plan. Access is proposed via 1 collector street and 2 emergency access only driveways via South Linder Road. 2 stub streets are proposed at the north and 1 collector stub street is proposed at the southwest boundary of the site for future extension. Unimproved right-of-way is proposed along the north boundary to the west at the northwest corner of the site. That is in this green area right here. As for future construction of a collector street if needed. Each phase of development is proposed to have 2 accesses for emergency services. The access from the north via Victory Road will be constructed with the first phase of development. The existing roadways in this area are rural in nature. There are no roadway improvements planned in this area until between 2031 and 2035, when Linder Road is planned to be widened to 3 lanes from Amity to Victory Road, and the Amity-Linder intersection is planned to be reconstructed. Linder Road between Victory and Overland Road is planned to be widened to 5 lanes, and the Victory Road and Linder Road intersection is planned to be reconstructed between 2021 and 2025. The proposed development falls within the interim Southwest Sewer Phasing Plan as developed by the Meridian Public Works Department. As such, it will require the construction of a temporary sewer lift station, trunk line, and pressurized sewer force main at the expense of the developer. Qualified open space is proposed in excess of the minimum 10% required by the UDC. A total of 22.45 acres or 18.9% is proposed, consisting of a large central common area with a pond, linear open space with pathways, common areas greater than 50 feet by 100 feet in size, parkways along streets, and collector and arterial street buffers. Site amenities are proposed in accord with UDC standards from the quality of life, recreation, and pedestrian or bicycle circulation system categories. A swimming pool and pool house, a multi-use sports court, children's play equipment, and a picnic area next to a large pond containing benches, a covered shelter, and picnic tables are proposed with the first phase of development. And a pocket park with play structures consisting of fake logs and boulders is proposed on the other large common area in the third phase. Pathways are proposed throughout this site as shown on the pedestrian plan. 2 10-foot wide multi-use pathway connections are proposed from the sidewalk along Linder Road that merge into the central common area and continue as one to the north boundary along the collector street. Internal pathways are proposed for interconnectivity, and detached sidewalks are proposed throughout the development adjacent to streets. The Culkins lateral crosses the northeast corner of this site. The applicant proposes to leave it open and improve the area's linear open space with a pathway. Fencing is required to be installed to deter access to the waterway unless the applicant can demonstrate to the satisfaction of the director that the waterway serves as or will be improved as a water amenity, as defined in the UDC, in which case fencing may not be required. Fencing is not proposed around the pond. If council determines this presents a safety hazard, a condition requiring such should be added. A detail of the pond was submitted, shown on the right there, that depicts a safety bench, a shallow area before it drops off into a more deep area of the pond for public safety. Sample photo elevations of the types of homes planned to be constructed in this development were submitted as shown. Homes are a mix of 1- and 2-story units of varying sizes for the variety of lot sizes proposed. Building materials consist of a mix of finished materials with stone and brick veneer accents. Revised elevations were submitted for the homes proposed on the 40 to 45-foot wide lots as requested by staff, and those are the ones shown on the right that include more design elements and materials to provide a higher quality of design than those originally proposed. The commission did recommend approval of this project, and I'll go through the summary of the commission hearing now. Sabrina Dirchke, the applicant's representative, testified in favor of the application, along with Deborah Nelson, a legal counsel representing the applicant. Annette Alonzo, Julie Langlois, Paula Connolly, and Kenzie Ward testified in opposition. Written testimony was received from Julie Langlois, Brian Conley, Kenzie Ward, and Paula Conley. Key issues of public testimony are as follows: not enough transition in lot sizes to adjacent rural properties, requests for 1/2 to 1 acre lot sizes as a transition, and a landscape buffer and berm at the west boundary. Protection of view sheds and rural lifestyle, right to farm, raise, and process their cattle. Concern pertaining to capacity of area schools with the proposed development on all of the developments that have been approved in this area but not yet developed. Concern pertaining to traffic and inadequacy of existing infrastructure to handle more development in this area with no plans to widen Linder Road until 2031 to 2035, which is currently a rural 2-lane roadway. Would like to see a greater setback along Linder Road so that when the road is expanded in the future, there will be still be enough green space and landscaping to keep the rural feel of the area and reduce impacts on landscaping. Concern that it's not an efficient way to expand the city's infrastructure with the project's location on the fringe of the city. Concern pertaining to the timing of this development, balancing the growth with the state of the economy. Supportive of the proposed detached homes, but opposed to townhomes and duplexes. Based on discussions with the neighbors, the Reinheimers and the Robertsons, the developer has agreed to provide a 3 to 4 foot tall berm with a wood-style fence on top of the berm, centered on the shared property line along the northern portion of the west boundary of the site, adjacent to their properties. Landscaped with trees at a spacing of approximately 25 feet along their side of the fence that they would maintain. The developer has also agreed to limit the height of homes to single story where there will be in direct view shed out of the physical house on adjacent properties. And finally, the developer also agreed to double the required rear building setback of 15 feet to provide a minimum 30-foot rear setback along the west and south boundaries of the subdivision. Key issues of discussion by the commission are as follows. The commission asked the applicant where the additional children's play equipment recommended by staff would be located. The applicant responded it will be in a large common area by the swimming pool. Commission asked the applicant if the pond would be empty in the winter after irrigation season. The applicant responded no, that it would have a permanent water level year-round. Commission was generally not supportive of staff's recommendation to provide a variety of housing types, attached and townhomes within the development. Those have since been removed based on the commission's recommendation. The commission discussed extending the R2 zoning along the southern boundary of the site. Finally, adequacy of the proposed transition in lot sizes and buffer to adjacent rural residential properties. The commission made the following changes to the staff recommendation. They removed the requirement for a variety of housing types to be provided. The commission was not in favor of the attached and townhouse product at the northeast corner of the site proposed by the applicant in response to the staff recommendation based on comp plan policies. They, included a development agreement provision requiring a berm and fence to be constructed on the shared property line adjacent to the Reinheimer and Robertson property as committed by the developer. They included a development agreement provision that limits the height of homes to single-story, where they will be in the direct view shed out from the physical house on adjacent properties. Staff recommended that the applicant address which specific lots will have single-story homes at the council hearing. And they did submit an exhibit, I'm sure they'll be showing in their presentation on which lots those are. And they also submitted an exhibit that depicts half-acre lots in the R2 zone, which reduced the lot count by 5 in this area. They included a development agreement provision that requires a minimum 30-foot rear setback for homes along the west and south boundaries of the subdivision. There are only a couple outstanding issues for council. The commission recommended council consider whether or not there should be some funding or a partnership toward future intersection improvements at Amity and Linder Road. And a letter of testimony was submitted by Laren Bailey, DevCo, requesting condition B1.1 is modified to require the construction of the sewer main line to Meridian Road with the first phase of development. Because this was previously discussed with the applicant but inadvertently not included in the conditions, staff is in support of this change requested and asks the council include that. Several letters of testimony have been submitted that are included in the public record. Staff will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Sonia. Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilwoman Schrader.
Sonia, thank you. If you could please pull up, if we have our priority growth areas map, and just point out where this would fall on that. It doesn't have to be at this exact moment, but that would help me to sort of contextualize exactly where this sits.
And Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Hoagland.
Yeah, while she's pulling that up, or I have the same question along the same vein as Councilwoman Strader. I was curious that, you know, this is on our fringe, and, you know, that's typically, I think I read, not a priority for extension of city services. I was curious, I was trying to remember how far was the nearest annex property or development that is near this proposal.
I don't know if they're searching for a map, but I can tell you this is not in southeast Meridian and is not in northwest Meridian. That's as far as I can tell you from the growth priority map discussion.
Thank you, that's helpful. So, and I understand, I didn't mean to put anybody on the spot, we may not have that at our fingertips, but I just wanted to check, my impression was that did not fall within that initial area that we had outlined in the yes. Anyway, you get what I'm saying.
I would classify this as southwest Meridian, not southeast Meridian.
Thank you.
If you want to use Meridian Road as the dividing line.
That would be perfect. Thank you. That helps.
Council, any other questions for staff at this time? Okay, if the applicant would like to come forward.
Is that better? Yes. Evening, Mayor, members of the council, Deborah Nelson, 601 West Bannock in Boise. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Toll Southwest LLC. Here with me this evening are members of the Toll Development Team and also our traffic engineer, Sonia Delighten with Kittleson, is participating by Zoom and is available to answer your questions as well. We are pleased to present to you this evening Cedar Brook Subdivision. This presentation follows over a year of design and planning, meeting with interested parties. The input we've received have helped to shape and change the development that you're seeing this evening. We are proud to have a recommendation for approval from your staff, from your Planning Commission, from the ACHD Commission. Commenting service providers have confirmed that this site and its residents can be served with sewer, water, fire, police, and schools. I'd like to briefly introduce Toll Brothers to you. Toll Brothers is an award-winning Fortune 500 company that purchased Coleman Homes in 2016. While they developed throughout the valley, they sited their headquarters here, right here in Meridian, where they employ over 130 people. They also hire local contractors, consultants, and vendors to build their communities throughout the valley. Toll's planning for this development began with your comprehensive plan. As Sonia noted, the property is designated as medium-density residential. It's down here located where the blue star is on this slide. This property has gone through 2 comprehensive plan updates and remained medium-density residential. A change that did occur during the last comprehensive plan update was that the property to our west petitioned for the city to change them to low-density residential, and that occurred. This change certainly influenced our design and the transitional zoning that we proposed. The city has planned a vibrant area near this site. To our north and northeast is the 10-mile area specific plan, where the city called for higher densities, employment, and commercial activities. To our west, just beyond the current county platted lots, is mixed-use neighborhood designation. To our east, a similar activity node is at Meridian and Amity with a designation of mixed-use community. Our property is conveniently located between these activity centers and between the 2 key interchanges at 10 Mile and Meridian. Our immediate adjacent properties are designated as a mix of low and medium density residential. As has been planned by Meridian, this residential area will provide the rooftops that are needed to support planned commercial and provide homes that are close to these planned employment centers nearby. Consistent with this comprehensive plan and based on discussions with city staff, we developed transitional zoning with the 3 zones that Sonia outlined for you, R2, R4, and R8. As an accommodation to neighbors' requests, we have enlarged the lots within the R2 zone. I'll discuss that in more detail, but I want to note that the zoning areas and the site layout remain the same. We're not asking for any exceptions or variances to your zoning standards in any of these 3 zones. The city has approved other nearby residential developments, and this will be responsive to your question, Councilmember Hoagland. Immediately across Linder from this site, the property has annexed, zoned, and approved developments of residential developments. These developments fall within the low and medium density areas that we saw in your comp plan for that central area. And the approved zones range from R4 to R40, with densities ranging from 2.68 to over 14. Notably, none of these approved developments included an R2 zone, even within or adjacent to low-density designated areas on your comprehensive plan map. Our proposed zones transition nicely to these developments to the east. Our proposed density of 2.72 falls on the low end of the densities approved nearby and is below the 3 to 8 range that the city has planned for this property. But we believe, and I believe staff confirmed, that we found the right balance to provide that good transition between the lower density to our west and the increasingly higher density to our east. We appreciate staff and Planning Commission support of this proposal.
Mr. Mayor, We can't hear.
Okay. 1 second. Pause the time.
Is it a matter of my speaking up? Does that make it better?
That sounds great right there. Thank you.
Okay, is there anything you needed me to repeat, or were you able to catch some of that?
I think you can continue.
Okay, thank you very much. The development team has had several meetings with Public Works, with fire, police. All of these providers have confirmed they can readily serve this project. We are literally down the street from the new fire station and will help provide the needed property tax base to support its operation. The water and sewer design is in accordance with city plans and approved by Public Works. We are agreeable to the request from the neighboring developer of the property who asked for us to develop the sewer in the first phase. ACHC has approved the plat, and we agree with all of the conditions of approval. Turning to schools, Toll has also met with Joe Yoakum several times, and he has indicated that he has no concerns with this development. School-aged children in our neighborhood and throughout Meridian have many choices for schools, and I think Joe and others recognize that the long-term impacts of COVID are yet to be understood. But surely there will be some additional students that take advantage of online school options, and Weststate has responded with an enhanced and larger virtual school with its own principal. Regardless of those future long-term changes that may occur, all Weststate schools that serve Cedar Brook currently have capacity. This reflects the near-complete expansion of Mary McPherson Elementary School. Additionally, the Weststate School District as a whole has capacity. In 2019 and projected for 2020, capacity is of enrollment. The district also has new capacity coming online that's already planned, funded, and underway to accommodate projected growth that will result in just over 3,100 new seats for students. Sonia spent a lot of time going through the pathway trail system, so I'll just highlight the total linear footage. The regional pathway will have 4,600 linear feet. Other internal HOA pathways that will be maintained by the homeowners association, 3,000 linear feet for a total of 7,600 feet. This doesn't include any of the sidewalks that provide similar connectivity, and they are all detached. Cedar Brook has over 22 acres of open space. At 18.9%, this is almost double what is required. In response to comments received, we increased the open space shown in this plan to include a park area in the RA zone and added a second playground. Cedar Brook will meet and exceed the city's amenity requirements. I'd like to show you some of those amenities. The pool and the clubhouse. Another shot. A playground structure in the R4 zone, and another play area will be next to the main amenity. A sport court with half basketball court. A large covered picnic area with picnic tables. And another shot of this area to show you. Cedar Brook will offer a wide variety of housing opportunities, from starter homes to larger estate homes. These elevations are for homes that are shown in this slide are for homes in the narrow lots in the northeast. These are detached products. All have 2-car garages targeting the entry-level buyer at 1,400 to 1,900 square feet. The garden collection will be within the R8 zone and will range from 1,200 to 2,500 square feet. These homes will offer functional living space and size. The woodland collection will be a majority of the R4 zone. This housing option will range from 1,580 to 2,890 square feet and specializes in open floor plans and quality craftsmanship. The countryside collection includes estate homes and will be located in the R2 zone. This collection offers larger homes that range from 2,900 to 4,500 square feet. This collection embodies elegance and luxury, top-of-the-line finishes. Toll has had extensive community outreach with the surrounding adjacent neighbors. They held 3 neighborhood meetings. They've also worked closely with our adjacent neighbors in the county, with numerous individual and group meetings, including in recent weeks, to continue to try to address their concerns. Many neighbors had concerns about their view shed. As a result, Toll hired a consultant to take pictures from each neighbor's backyard and to produce renderings of how the development may look, and then shared these renderings with neighbors to receive feedback and requests for mitigation. The result of these meetings was numerous concessions by developers. We recognize we certainly cannot please everyone, but some individuals have expressed their appreciation for these concessions, and they are significant. Some of the mitigation Toll has agreed to is listed here, and I'll walk through a few of these items. First, it's important to note that there is existing topography here that presents an elevation change, and any transition plan needs to take into account specific facts and circumstances. The neighbors along our southwest corner sit 33 to 35 feet higher than our lots and homes. As shown in these diagrams, you can see from one example where an existing home is 385 feet from the property line and another is 280 feet. Both sit on top of a ridge that ensures all homes will not obstruct them. In fact, all of the county homes in the west and southwest property are over 200 to 400 feet from the property line. As I mentioned, Toll prepared renderings from each property. This is a picture taken by our photographer from the southwest property along the rim. We were careful not to use any photos provided by neighbors. As you can see, the homes are down in the valley. They do not obstruct any portion of the view of the distant hill. The closest structure, as you can see in the foreground, is actually a neighbor's existing barn, right in the center. Toll has agreed to increase setbacks, doubling the rear setback along the entire R2 perimeter from 15 feet to 30 feet. Toll has also agreed to install buffers. Originally, at the Planning and Zoning Commission on the western border, and that was incorporated into the conditions of approval. They are also agreeable to extend along the southwest border. They will provide a berm on the property line, a wood-style vinyl privacy fence, and trees for 25 feet. This is a rendering shown from one of the western properties, which is a flatter property, and still you can see that these installed buffers create great mitigation that's also enhanced by the fact that the house is so far set back from the property. Toll has also agreed to provide 60% single-story homes along the R2 perimeter, lined up with a direct view shed and neighboring county homes. These single-story lots are shown in red on the slide. This is a significant concession because the larger lots in the R2 really warrant a larger premium home. Toll has also agreed, after careful consideration and numerous meetings with the neighbors and their requests, also taking into account what the comprehensive plan says and what's feasible in the development to have a successful community. And they have agreed that they can increase the perimeter lot in the R2 zone to a minimum half acre. To provide a minimum half acre means that some lots range higher up to 2/3 of an acre. This caused them to lose an additional 5 premium lots. And I say additional because from the very first neighborhood meeting where they began with 27, they're now down to 14 along this concession.
Mr. Mayor, I apologize to interrupt, but she's just disappeared. I can barely hear some mumbling.
Is this better? I've tipped
Yes.
the microphone up. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, again, I guess I would ask, is there anything I can repeat from this slide or prior slides?
I think this slide, you covered the details in writing, looks like.
Thank you very much. This slide shows a comparison of the recent change from a 1/3 acre minimum along the perimeter to a 1/2 acre minimum along the perimeter. And it really illustrates the significant change of the number of lots that would front each of these county properties. And it's important to understand how significant that change really is to only have a couple of lots that front your property when we're trying to transition from very large county subdivision into a city planned area for medium density residential. Another concession that the developer has pursued here, there was a planned collector roadway along our western boundary. ACHD, at our request, at city staff support and ACHD staff support, did agree to remove that collector roadway and to change their master street map. The neighbors to our west really did not want that road in that location. The road itself probably would have provided significant barrier to not require as much transition, but the neighbors did not want that road there, and we helped to relocate that. One of our neighbors, Julie Langlois, stated in a recent letter to the council that Century Farm by Brighton is an excellent example of a developer who made efforts to retain the rural feel and history of Meridian. We couldn't agree more that Century Farm is a really well done, wonderful community. In fact, Toll acquired a piece of that master plan and developed it under the name of Orchard Creek. But it's important to note what they provide in this excellent example. If you compare our density and lot sizes and open space, you can see that Cedar Brook has lower density, larger lots, and more open space.
Deborah, if you can wrap up.
I can, thank you, Mayor. I don't need to go through these conditions of approval because we did address them in our written communication in response to the staff report. They simply incorporate the concessions that we have agreed to that I just walked through as conditions of approval that we would be happy to accept. And I would stand for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Council, any questions for the applicant?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
Sonia, or if someone on staff could bring up the slides about the school capacity. I'll just start while we're pulling it up. I think what I'm struggling with, I feel like I'm hearing two different stories, and I don't want to burden staff with something that can't be accomplished here, but I guess I'm trying to square this information on school capacity with the public testimony that was provided in written form by Annette Alonzo, who also had a conversation with Joe Yoakum regarding school capacity, and following her math, it looked pretty clear that the schools in this area would be at least 200 kids over capacity, pro forma for this development. And I'm struggling to figure out fact from fiction. I was curious if the applicant could just comment further on your conversations with the school district. And I understand that we have the virtual schoolhouse, but I'm assuming that the coronavirus situation won't last forever. Hopeful that it won't. Could you please comment further on your conversations specifically with the school district and how they will handle this additional influx of students, especially in light of approved developments?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Strader, the Toll Development Team met with Joe Yoakum at the school district on 2 different occasions, on February 28th and on June 29th, and coordinated closely with their GIS analyst as well. They received information from the GIS analyst, Eric, on numerous occasions, including in particular on May 19th. And in those discussions, they did receive confirmation of the numbers that we've presented and that the school district was comfortable with the addition of this development. Obviously, what I've presented here is current capacity. It also is looking toward projected capacity for 2020. The school district does take into account additional developments that are approved As you know, that's how they make some of their projections for going forward, so that they understand what the student load is going to be. And based on the numbers that we have for the fall of 19 from actual numbers and for projection of 2020, they did not have any concerns with this development. We did also talk to them about, I guess I don't have control over this, if you wouldn't mind advancing to the next slide, because I think this is also responsive to your question. Looking at the district-wide, where the school district is taking into account all of the capacity, you have to think about some of this new capacity that's coming online. And so district-wide, they also have, they are keeping ahead of the capacity ahead of enrollment from actual 2019 numbers and projected 2020 numbers. And that's before any of this funded and programmed capacity comes into play that would cover these projected growth patterns that perhaps are what is referred to in Ms. Alonzo's testimony.
Deborah, if I, just on one point on this one, I mean, I understand the Mountain View High expansion number, but that's really just replacing portables. They're not going to reduce or add more than what they currently have at that school. They're just in portables now, and they'll be in physical structures.
Mr. Mayor, those are the numbers in addition to for capacity that came from the school district.
I understand that, but just to put it in perspective, they're not adding that much more space at Mountain View High School. It actually just is going to remove the portables that are currently there for that space that they are currently occupying. It's a net zero essentially currently for the Mountain View expansion, unless they decide to keep the portables there, but that's not their intention. So that would make it a 3,000 student school.
Mr. Mayor, if the council would like, I do have some additional information that's broader to the West Ada School District that I can provide an additional slide if you'd like. It's later in the presentation. I don't have time to get to everything, but if you want.
I think Councilwoman Schrader had another question, so I'll defer to her.
Certainly, I would love to see the additional information in a minute. I mean, I'm trying to just follow the math, right? So right now, the school district is very close to capacity based on 2019 actual numbers. If I give them the benefit of new school capacity of 3,000 units, and I know that approximately, call it 2,000 kids graduate per year, maybe I get to 5,000 or 6,000 of capacity. From what I understand from information I've received as part of the budgeting process, we have 7,500 units that are approved and entitled in the city of Meridian. So I think the piece that's missing for me that I would like us to just work on collectively is what have we approved that we think will be delivered, so we can ourselves check as a city our own numbers on with the school district's help on expected capacity and really what we think will be delivered from our end on what we've approved. I'm probably just boring everyone to death because I keep bringing this up, and I apologize, but I'm very stuck on it. So yes, I would love to see your additional slides.
May I have control over the, okay. It's not advancing for me. There it goes, thank you. Mr. Mayor, if I may respond to that. Councilmember Strader, you know, we've heard you say that question before. We understand your line of questioning. It is outside the scope really of our development. You know, we presented to you the numbers that impact Cedar Brook, but we're not deaf to your question. And so we did ask the school district for the current platted lots. I believe this was as of this week. So it's 13,840 platted lots in the West Ada School District as a whole. And the way that the school district projects growth from that, they multiply that number times 0.8, I think as you know, per lot, to estimate the number of students. They expect that those students will be generated from these various approved preliminary plats that may or may not come to fruition and are phased in over a period of time. They assume that will come in over a 10-year period, or approximately 1,100 new students per year. When you compare that to capacity, West Ada has planned capacity to cover that approved growth. And, we've added the Cedar Brook numbers here, which is just 26 students per year under that math, so it hardly impacts it. But if you look down at the tables below at current growth and capacity, you can see that the projected capacity stays ahead of the projected enrollment. The school district is planning forward as they look at updated preliminary plat numbers. Now, as I know you know, the further the projection goes out, it's not funded yet. That is part of the cycle. The newer immediate construction, the ones I highlighted, are funded, they're bonded, they begin construction. The further out the projection goes, they aren't yet funded, but that's just the nature of it, that they can't all be done at once. The school district has said very clearly in their capacity plan that they won't begin looking for a new school until they have the capacity numbers that would fill a new school. And so, but they are nonetheless staying ahead of their projected capacity is ahead of projected enrollment. So I hope that helps. This is what we've been able to acquire from West Ada.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
if staff could please print me a copy of this slide, because I'm going to need a few minutes myself just to look at the data. Just to clarify, does the school district have a funding source only for the capacity expansion projects you showed on the previous first slide, or do they have funding for additional expansion? And the reason I'm asking is, as you know, their supplemental levy recently failed. From what I understand, they do not have a funding source to build additional schools.
Mr. Mayor, Council Administrator, my understanding is from the school district that list is the funded list that's under construction and does not include, for example, Blue Valley Elementary that was postponed from the choice about the bond.
And Deborah, I think you hit on, at least from talking about schools, if you look at the numbers you showed about the capacity, it's approximately 2,400 in high school. It's a very disproportionate number of stuff. And in South Meridian, elementary is the largest issue related to growth, specifically in the Hillsdale area, but it extends throughout the entire area. And the two that are on there are in North Meridian from an elementary standpoint. So it isn't always apples to apples. The numbers are what the numbers are. The reality is sometimes somewhere in between with what the numbers say for the different parts of the community.
Mr. Mayor, I completely understand and agree.
Mr. Mayor, just one more,
Councilman Schrader.
then I'll move off of this because I'm just hit to death today. I'm sorry, guys. I guess the last thing I would just say, hopefully people can hear me. If the school district is listening, I highly urge you to provide this same information and these same projections directly to city staff with our planning department so we can have a real conversation about the growth in Meridian, because it is an endless frustration for me that this information is provided to an applicant, but it's not being provided directly to the city, unless I'm wrong. But my understanding is that it hasn't been, and that, for me, creates an untenable position where I have to choose between one set of facts that look very good from our applicant and then facts that are being given by the public without the actual source of the data providing the facts to us. Sorry. Thank you.
Councilman Cavanagh.
It's a hard one to follow. Well said, Councilman Schrader. Ms. Nelson, thanks for your presentation. Appreciate you being here tonight. I kind of want to dovetail a little bit off of Councilmember Schrader's questions. If I remember correctly from the staff report, this is a 7-phase project. I didn't hear you, and maybe I missed it, touch on kind of the calendaring or the plan for all 7 phases, when one would begin, when the second phase would begin, so on and so forth. And if you, in your comments, can articulate which proposed phases would touch on the various densities that are outlined. You have that great map that shows kind of the 3 densities of your project. Anything that you can highlight on that would be very, very helpful.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Cavanagh, let me see if I can, I don't know that I have at my fingertips every answer to your question, so I may need to call upon others to help, but at least here you can see the scale, the ordering, and also the development timing. And so land development would begin in early 2021, so next year. Home building would begin summer 2021. Occupancy of the very first phase would be in early 2022. There are years that are attached to each phase, you can see in this exhibit as well, that are estimated at this point, but that is the current plan.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton?
one question to follow up on Councilwoman Strader's line of questioning. Deb, when you meet with the school district and in light of, this project, but also Brundage and Biltmore and Stapleton, do they provide to you locations of lots, properties that they own for future, unfunded, unplanned, but eventual school sites around this area? And is there anything in the K-8 range near this development, at least land from the school district?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Borton, my understanding, but I believe it's more perhaps from looking at the facilities plan, but maybe also from Toll's discussions with the school district, is that there is a future high school site and a future elementary site near this property along Linder. But I don't have more specifics than that, I'm sorry. In the facilities plan, they do lay out general regions for future development, but I think largely it is in response to need.
Understood. Okay, thanks.
Council, any further questions for the applicant?
Mr. Mayor?
I think that's Councilman Hoagland.
Okay, Mr. Mayor. Question for Ms. Nelson. In your testimony, you talked about removing properties on that western border, and I'm looking at the phasing. It looks like was one of the original proposed phasing and platting of, looks like there's more properties along those Ada County rural properties than there are in the newly submitted one. Is that correct?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Hoagland, that's correct. This is the old lot layout.
Okay. And you said, Mr. Mayor, to follow up, reduced it by about 14 properties. So they're that's where the area those were reduced.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Hoagland, it perhaps would be easiest to look at the transitional zoning. I think that may answer your question the best. You can see in the R2 zone, this is also the previous plan, and in that R2 zone, which is pink here, we eliminated 5 lots in our recent concession that we've offered to the council if you want to impose that condition to further increase the lot sizes and reduce the density in that R2 zone.
Mr. Mayor, Ms. Nelson, so that would increase the lot size to the half acre, if not a little more in size?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Hoagland, that's right. We had committed to a minimum half acre, which means that some of them necessarily range up to 2/3, and that's all along the perimeter.
Thank you.
Council, anything further?
Hmm.
This time?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Borton?
it's not here in the presentation, but I think that facilities plan, which is referenced, the school district's facilities plan does reference school sites that they have planned for future, if should future funding arise, and there's some near this property.
Yes, that is correct. There is future places near this property when funding is there. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, we had several people sign in. Mindy Lynn is the first who wished to testify.
Okay, as your name is called, if you would come forward or raise your hand on the Zoom app, and you'll be recognized for 3 minutes. And please state your name and address for the record prior to starting your testimony.
My name is Mindy Lynn. My address is 4262 South Wrestler. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I actually, I signed up to speak, as did my neighbor, Wayne Martin, who's actually out of town and had an incident of flat tires. So buying our time, but I will still, our statements, if that's okay, and I will still be under the 3 minutes.
Yep, 3 minutes.
So I will start with Wayne's. Wayne is on record saying, I would like it to be known at this evening's meeting that Toll Brothers has been nothing but divisive throughout this entire process. They have met with most of us on an individual basis, and each time we were told something different than what they were actually planning on doing. I was personally told by Adam Capel and Sabrina Dursey that they would provide 1 acre to 3/4 acre lots on the R2 boundary, and those homes would be 1 story. I explained privacy was paramount for us, and they both agreed with me. I also told Mr. Capel and Ms. Dursey that they would create, I was also told by them that they would create a 6-foot berm with a 6-foot fence on top of that, as well as populate with trees and other vegetation. They also promised to step out services for our rural community to take advantage of. Mr. Capel and Ms. Dursey both agreed that they would provide this to me in writing, as they told others the same prior to any city council meeting. I've attempted 3 times to reach out to them without a response. In my last face-to-face meeting with Mr. Capel and Ms. Dursey, I told them how important it was that they did not to pit one neighbor against another. I explained to both of them we did not want to get in the middle of any arguing. Against my wishes and their own word, they have tried very hard to pit neighbors against the other. Most of the neighbors in these 2 communities are very close, and most of us are very good friends. I find it despicable that they have went to such lengths to attempt to separate our opinions from one another. I would like it to be known we are all, Rock Ranch and Stanton Estates, a united front, and understand progress is necessary, but we also understand there is a right way to proceed and a wrong way. Toll Brothers has opted for the latter and has been very deceitful throughout the process. At this point, I do not see Toll Brothers as a good neighbor, nor a good business partner for the city of Meridian. Each of us in these 2 neighborhoods have worked hard to obtain what we have. We chose these 2 neighborhoods because we wanted the rural lifestyle that Southern Meridian provided. Please do not allow Toll Brothers to take from us what we all love so much. Mr. Mayor and City Council, I myself would like to end my 3 minutes by pointing out what we all understand. In addition to burdening our schools, leapfrogging over open land to develop this far out, it's important to remind this developer and future developers that in order for good reputations to remain intact, relationship management has to be prioritized. While they may have lovely presentations, make no mistake, how they operate behind the scenes proves Toll Brothers does not understand this philosophy. You should know that we were recently told by our current Toll Brothers representative that Toll Brothers and this model were already touted by the city as the model for developers breaking into rural communities. If this is the case, the city is in trouble. We have consistently asked for 1 acre minimum transition. However, as Toll Brothers continues to refuse to work with us or put anything in writing, continues to respond to requests, and makes changes at the 11th hour, even as late as last night at 10:30, continues to pick and choose neighbors to work with while boasting that they have the model the city wants established. Their strategy to divide and conquer has neighbors who are worn down from a year of lies and charades and now fearful that they should settle for less out of worry for that for that the city will not hold to their statements that we were heard back in December. Please uphold what was said in December and protect our rural properties by not approving a plan with anything less than 1 acre for R2 and single-story homes as an appropriate transition between our homes. As you will hear tonight from Mrs. Ward's testimony, there are so many other things that have been requested still not in writing in this plan, and we desperately need your help. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, next we have Wendy Webb, who has signed up speaking on behalf of the Southern Rim Coalition.
If you could speak into that microphone real well so Councilman Hoagland can hear you.
If you don't mind, I'm going to take off my mask because I know my voice is very soft to begin with. Good evening, Mayor Simpson and City Council members. For the record, my name is Wendy Webb. My address is 2299 East Lodge Trail Drive in Meridian, Idaho. Thank you for allowing me a few minutes of your time tonight. I hope you have all had the opportunity to review the Southern Rim Coalition's thoughts that were submitted on this application. The amount of documents on this application are very impressive. I'm impressed that you have had the time to look at so much of them. In short, you've heard it all before. Please set the standard high. We've been really impressed with this new city council. What a great job you're doing in that regard. Our biggest concerns, as always, are quality open space, proper lot transition, emergency services, schools, pathways. You know what we're concerned about. Tonight, I'm hoping to give you some additional insight into the schools for this particular development. Like Councilman Strader, I am also very zeroed in on the schools. I'm very concerned about our community and the capacity of our district. I've put together a little presentation to help us better understand the situation. So we'll go to the next slide. Do I have control of that? Yeah. You have to forgive me too. This is, oh, okay, here we are. The first letter, or the first line, first line talks about how West Ada has experienced significant and sustained growth in student enrollment during this last 10 years. Many of our schools throughout the district are operating at or above capacity. So to start out, what the district has told us, most of their schools, many of their schools are operating at or above capacity. With this new development, go to the next page, Cedar Brook will have 330 homes. The other developments in that area that are feeding into the same schools are 1,550. Now I have to tell you, it is labor intensive to go through the city application and try and figure out how many residential units are planned. I put 1,550 plus because I wasn't able to find numbers for what's left in Cabin Ridge Estates, what's left in Timber Ridge Line Estates, or what's in South Ridge. I understand South Ridge is an apartment complex, so the numbers are a little lower. So just so you know, it's 1,550 plus homes. Now you add the Cedar Brook homes, that makes it 1,880 new homes feeding into those schools, which with the school board's, the school district's calculation, that creates 1,540 new students to feed into those schools. The elementary, approximately 770 new students. Mary McPherson can take 69 of those students. That leaves 701 students. Okay, now granted, we are hoping that more schools will pass in bonds. But let's just say 30% of those homes are built before Blue Valley comes, which is really reasonable looking at the slide a few minutes ago. At the earliest we're going to get it would be the fall of 23. 162 students will still need to attend other schools before that school even comes online. The middle school, there will be approximately 385 students that could feed the middle school. Victory can take 31. They're also competing with the rest of South Meridian, where we have over 1,700 new homes that have been approved in the other area just east of that. Victory can take 31 of those students. That leaves 354 students in this area to be bused to other schools. And there are no other middle schools planned in the near future. A few months ago, I went to a school board meeting and they talked about growth. I think, if I remember right, there's a site just north of Amity, across from the new YMCA that's slotted for middle school. But if I remember right, it was like 27 or something that when they thought it could be built. But that's, that's projected to change. I'm not sure where the middle school students would go, to be honest with you. High school, there's approximately 385 students from this area. They will go to Meridian High School at this time. Meridian High School has the capacity that can take all 385 of those students. That might change as other developments in the city add to Meridian High School population. We all ask, is this a boundary problem? That's a valid question. I'm not sure that it's a new elementary school is opening this fall, Pleasant View, and I think around here.
Mr. Mayor, can you have Wendy, I think she's turning her head because she has a couple strong words and then a couple disappear, so.
Okay, I'll try not to move. That's hard. Okay, so Pleasant View came online and they didn't change any of our boundaries. That kind of makes me wonder and think that it's not a boundary problem. I also know that moving children to different schools frequently can be hard on their emotional and social well-being. And then I know that reportedly last October, talking to Joe Yoakum, he said that there were 1,000 empty seats in the elementary schools in West Ada. So we know through the year, some of those seats filled. But if you just take those 1,000 seats and you spread them over the 34 schools that are in West Ada District, that gives each school less than 29 seats that are extra in the school. And that's having the school classroom size be a size of 30. I am not in favor of first grade classrooms having a capacity of 30. And so that's kind of a high number there. So with approximately 24 classes per school, that's like one, give or take, per class. Really, that's not much of a cushion. I think that any school district needs to have that kind of a cushion.
The audio's fading in and out again, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, would you like to testify from another location, or do we want to try a different, I know we have a handheld. Try that one.
Maybe that'll accommodate my moving, sorry. Okay.
Yep, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Ms. Borden?
I apologize. Now it's totally no sound.
Yeah, they're working on turning the microphone on.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Can you hear anything now from the applicant? Can you just talk for a second?
Can you hear anything?
No, faint at best.
I just want to make it so that they can use the machine to advance their own slides and things of that nature. Try that.
I can have you advance.
Why they're getting set up, just for some of the analysis that you're seeing is what the new position will be doing. Just a little bit more detail, because what they did showcase here is not the full boundary for Meridian High School, which has a fairly large boundary, which has a lot more development, but you get a fuller picture as well. Just so some of my council members know what will be coming soon. The position starts on Monday.
So, Mr. Mayor, you saying at the next council meeting, we'll have some information?
No,
Okay.
soon.
Mayor, Council, this is Chris. Can you hear me in here?
Yes.
Okay, we are going to ask Sonia to advance the slides out there. We're going to turn Wendy over. I couldn't bring it up. She'll be able to turn camera on if you want. Should be able to see when they start to share again your presentation, and we'll click you through it. Okay.
That's good. I'm not a technology girl.
Okay, Wendy, whenever you're ready to continue.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Great. Okay, I'm trying to remember where I was at. Hopefully you remember where I'm at with the slides. I don't see the slides yet in front of me. I don't know if they're coming up. Okay. Thank you. Can you hear me still?
Yes.
Okay. Let's move on to the next slide. Just to give you an idea, when they say a school is overcrowded or at capacity, these are some samples that we saw at Hillsdale in the last couple of years. In 2018-2019 school year, fifth grade classes were at 38, 39, and 39 students per class. This was documented by school staff. Only one teacher stayed for the next year. Imagine that, they were worn out. In 2019-2021 school year, first grade classes had approximately 31 students. As quoted by a parent, all the first grade classes were around the same number. The classroom limit for first grade is supposed to be 26. A Mary McPherson classroom, which is the elementary school in this area that we're talking about tonight, cannot physically hold as many bodies as a Hillsdale classroom. They're really, really small. I was told by a parent that 25 is pretty top end. Going to the next slide. So our question, where's the breaking point? As you know, rapid growth is outpacing the school district's build after demand model. Neighborhood schools are overcrowded, necessitating busing. District schools don't have capacity. No alternative funding for building schools is out there, and the bonds simply can't keep up. Parents, just this week, where are the kids going to go to school? We always put the kids last when they are our future. 2 weeks ago, a CUNA realtor said, you don't want to buy in Meridian, their schools are overcrowded. So we all know that. Going back to the school letter, I had a question about their last sentence where they said school capacity and transportation is addressed in Idaho Code. Future development will continue to have an impact on the district's capacity. I put the Idaho Code there. I don't completely understand it. I think it would be great if we understood what the school district was meant by that sentence and maybe what council translate that sentence to mean. It's just one of my thoughts. This is a community problem. I'm not a finger pointer. I don't ever believe in laying blame on one person. I think the developers can have good plans. It's not reflecting on them. It's just reflecting on our community. We need to work together and come up with a solution. And this final slide, let's not bus our children to CUNA, Nampa, or Boise. And that is all I have for you tonight, unless you have further questions.
All right, thank you. Lindy, council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor, I'll take a bite. It's Liz.
Councilman Schrader.
Thank you, Wendy, for doing this amazing amount of analysis on your own. I think it just speaks to your passion on this topic. Out of the developments that you analyzed to get to the different numbers you're talking about, the 770 elementary students, middle school, et cetera, are these developments that have already been approved and are entitled, or what, like, how did you choose that population of new developments that are being delivered?
Those
in this
are
near term?
developments. Those are developments that already have been approved. As far as I know, unless I have something wrong, I've tried to be really careful, but those are developments that have already been approved.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions?
No.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, we have Kenzie Ward, who's signed up to speak on behalf of Rock Ranch Estates.
It might be better to go in the room, just as the council appears to be hearing better.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and appreciate Wendy accommodating us. She had important things to say and definitely wanted to hear that, so we appreciate her making that switch.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Awesome. Okay, good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak and share our concerns. My name is Kenzie Ward. I live at 4605 South Rock Ranch Lane and am representing my neighborhood, Rock Ranch Estates. As immediate neighbors to the proposed Cedar Brook subdivision, we would like to share our concerns regarding several aspects of this application. Although meetings with Toll Brothers have been held, our concerns have not been properly met, and we would like to see changes made to the proposed plan. It's been a long road to get here, but I can tell you for certain, none of us want this development here. None of us want 330 new neighbors. None of us want our schools to become even more overcrowded. None of us want the inevitable traffic congestion from the 3,334 vehicle trips this development will add per day to our two-lane, four-way stop country roads that do not have improvements planned in the next 10 years. None of us want our amazing views of beautiful farmland and mountain ranges to be replaced by rooftops. Some of us have been more vocal than others, but none of us approve of this development. However, we are here to try to make this development the best we possibly can if it is to be approved. Throughout this process that began last year with the comp plan meetings, we fought to protect our rural lifestyle and agricultural practices. However, our rural designation was removed and we are now considered low density. However, this medium density development is not abutting low density whatsoever, as it is indicated on the future land use map. Our subdivisions are not 3 houses per acre. They're not even 1 house per 3 acres. Our neighboring properties are absolutely rural with 1 house on 5 acres or more. This is a medium density development neighboring rural estate properties. This makes your job as our city leaders so incredibly important, and we look to you and your promises made last year during the comp plan meetings to hold true to your words. Commissioner Seal also remembered those promises made to protect rural residents from these encroaching developments as he spoke at the P&Z meeting on May 7th. When referring to continuing with larger lots around the perimeter, he said, quote, "This is something that the people that have the larger estates asked what could be done if we didn't keep the rural designation? What could be done when something like this happens against them?" So again, our answer was, well, we can help modify that in the future. So we had a lot of people that are asking for that. We are going to have people ask for it in the future, and I think it would be wise of us to recommend that to the city, end quote. Councilman Borton also spoke in support of protecting rural heritage and agricultural principles at the December 17th meeting, as well as protecting our area of Southern Meridian by saying, quote, "The open space in the rural context of Southern Meridian in particular, in some circumstances, it very well may be a 1 acre lot or 2 acre lot is the transition. It's a case-by-case basis. 1 acre might be too small for a transition," end quote. We absolutely agree with you, Councilman Borton. We are asking you to follow through with the promises of a proper transition when the time came, and that time is now. We are asking for a minimum of 1 acre lots along both the western and southern borders to transition from this dense development to our wide open spaces of Southwest Meridian. Commissioner Steele and Casanelli were not in favor of approving this development and wanted to see the R2 zone around the southern perimeter, not just along the western edge as proposed in the plat. We'd also like to see the 1 acre lots around the perimeter, west, southwest, and south perimeter to be a minimum of 200 feet wide with only single-story houses in order to reduce the impact on our view sheds. Another huge concern we have is that the promises that Toll Brother have said they would put into writing are nowhere to be seen in the application that I can find, nor have they been put into writing and given to those promises, as Mindy's testimony and Wayne's testimony said. They have made promises of a 4-foot berm with landscaping and a 6-foot wood-style vinyl fence along the perimeter. And you can see in their final pre-plat landscaping, there is nothing along the perimeter as far as berms and landscaping goes. There are only 5 lots that Toll Brothers has specified in their updates as of 2 o'clock this afternoon that they said they will put in a berm and fence, which is not acceptable. To quote Commissioner Steele from the P&Z meeting again, quote, I think if they are going to do a berm with trees and a fence along part of it that borders that, they should do a berm, a fence, and trees along all of it and make it all R2, speaking to the southwest and south portion of this. And we absolutely agree. The promised berm and landscaping should serve as the buffer along the entire western and southern perimeters, including the Radfords and the Lales properties continuing to the south, who also have 5+ acre properties. Without that berm as a buffer, there's nothing but a fence between our rural properties and hundreds of backyards. Another promise that has been made is that they will stub utilities, including fiber optic internet, to the property lines of both Stetson and Rock Ranch. Again, I can't find that promise written anywhere in their plan, including the revisions letter that was updated on June 29th, and we would like to have that in writing. Other than the 1 acre lots with single-story homes around the perimeter, we are only asking that the promises that have been made to our residents are actually put into writing in their plan, which include the 4-foot berm along the western and the southern perimeter with trees, bushes, and a 6-foot wood-style vinyl fence, as well as the utility stub to the property lines. We would also ask for there to be a provision in the development agreement that the homes will not be investor-owned. Toll Brothers has implemented a strategy when meeting with neighbors to divide and conquer, and it appears to be exactly that, a strategy to divide the neighborhood and meet individually so that Toll Brothers can say and promise whatever they want without it being refuted by others. This is a company that absolutely needs to be held to a higher standard and not allowed to cut corners. We do not believe Toll Brothers will follow through with any of these promises unless they are forced to keep them. So we ask you, our city leaders, please do not approve this development without all promises in writing and in the development agreement so that when it comes down to it, we have something to hold them accountable to. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Council, any questions?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, last on our list is Paula Connolly.
Yes. Sonia, you can hear me. Can you bring that up? Can you show this? Okay, so I can just tell her when I need it. Just the one page, but I don't need it up the whole time. Okay. Good evening, Mayor. Can you hear me?
We can. Paul, if you can just state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Paula Connolly. I live at 3878 South Rustler Lane, and I'm here to represent Stetson Estates.
You'll be recognized for 10 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. The testimony I prepared last night was very lengthy and very well prepared. And this morning I woke up to an email, and to my surprise, I had an email from Toll Brothers. And that is totally kind of put my testimony off kilter. So I apologize for anything that seems discombobbled. I am very frustrated with this whole process. Part of my frustration is getting the email at 10 o'clock at night. And when I find that in the morning, I'm trying to revise it while I'm at work all day, trying to run my husband's and my business. My second frustration is that the city and the planning department allow changes at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. As you could see and was pointed out by one of the council members earlier, the slides that Toll Brothers was using tonight didn't even have the accurate count number of properties on them, because what they are proposing now was turned in at 2 o'clock. That does not allow people to have any kind of time to prepare, especially when you're working or you're trying to run businesses, when you need to try and communicate with neighbors, because as it's been stated before, we are a very close-knit neighborhood. We do things together, we do communicate, and we have been trying to be a united front on this. So please forgive me if this is a little bit off. I will stand for questions at the end for clarity if you need it, because I have completely rewritten my speech since sitting here this evening. It is our position as a community, we are committed to 1 acre parcels since nothing was officially submitted until 2 p.m. today, leaving us no time for communications. We believe that there should be a minimum of 10 days that should be required by the city planning department and the city as a whole to have this complete so people have time to prepare. With that in mind, I would like to say that Stetson Estates would like to see 1 acre parcels as a transition between our communities and Cedar Brook. The Cedar Brook application on page 11 states that Toll Brothers is willing to take our concerns into consideration, providing an increased rear setback of 30 feet instead of the required 15 feet to provide substantial building separation and greater privacy. If you'll look at the picture on the upper left of the screen, those are landscape stakes that are staked 30 feet from my back house. That's 30 feet. I understand that's a minimum, but that is not a transition. I'm a very visual person, so let's take a look at the next picture. The picture on the upper right is a picture of a 3,556 square foot home on a half acre. As you can see, there is still not a very large transition in the back. I find it interesting that in their presentation, they tout that there's 280 feet between our houses and where their houses will sit with that 30-foot setback. That transition comes from our rural properties, not what they're putting in. That's not a proper transition to what we already have and is existing. And in the comprehensive plan 3.0701A, it states that all new developments are to create a site design compatible with surrounding uses through buffering, screening, transitional densities, and other best practices. That means that their transition needs to be on their side of the fence line, not ours. I also find it interesting that while they feel that that is a proper transition, you have to remember that we do practice light agriculture. And practicing light agriculture, we just raked our fields today. So that means I'm not standing 180 feet from my fence line. I'm driving up and down with a tractor, or my husband is, or somebody else. Okay. I don't stand just at my back house all day long. I'm outside with the cows. I'm outside with the chickens. I'm outside doing all kinds of things. So yes, their sight line that they say is not going to be an issue for us will be an issue for us when we're not right at our back door. We own properties that we farm on. That's why we want a proper transition. Those 1 acre lots protect the people who move into Cedar Brook as much as they protect our view sheds, our property values, and our privacy. It's up to you to balance the property rights between those that exist and those that want to sell their property to develop. We understand that it's not just our property rights, but as city council members, it's your awesome responsibility to figure out, how do I balance between what's there and what's coming in to make sure that those neighbors become good neighbors. Let me state our position very clearly, and then I will stand for questions. 1 acre parcels would be the best transition along with a berm, a wood-like vinyl fence centered on the property line with proper landscape screening provided. Considering how often we as neighbors have communicated.
Paula,
Yes.
can you restate, go back to where you, just about 20 seconds ago? We lost you on the audio.
What was I talking about?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Kavanagh.
If I remember, Paul, you were kind of wanting to state something kind of unequivocally. You wanted to be very direct to a point, and then at that, you're getting ready to make your point, and you went muffled.
Was it about agriculture?
You touched on that, so it'd be shortly thereafter. Again, to the mayor's point, about 20 seconds before we interrupted you.
Okay.
Paula, you were making it clear what our expectations and our asks were.
Okay. So let me state our position very clearly. 1 acre parcels would be the best transition along with a berm, a wood-like vinyl fence centered on the property line with proper landscape screening provided in the R2 areas. And considering how often we as neighbors have communicated that we would like to have everything in writing, we would like to see and ask that you respectfully remand this project to include the above items and that it be put into a development agreement to make it binding so that there are no last minute 2 p.m. changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Kavanagh.
Ms. Conley, thanks for your testimony. Couple of comments and maybe then a question for you. One, thanks. You know, you have kind of kept council updated and the public updated through your process, and want to apologize, I think, for the frustrations that you felt in information being delivered kind of, you know, to your perspective last minute. I think staff did a good job, at least at the Planning and Zoning Commission, in kind of articulating why some of that happened, but still wanted to apologize on behalf of the mayor and the council nevertheless. My question was, it looks like even as early as this afternoon, you've continued to have email conversations with the applicant. I'm just curious if some of that has been updated with us, at least from the applicant, and I'm just curious if there's any information that you want to share with the council since the email that we received earlier this afternoon.
I can tell you from June 30th last week, there was a planned meeting. Both myself and Mindy Lynn it would have been a little over a week ago. We had received phone calls asking us if we would be willing to accept half-acre parcels. And those phone calls were both individual. And myself, I told them I could not commit to that without talking to all of our neighbors because we had been communicating with each other about those things. Mindy Lynn's conversation went the same route. She said, we can set up a meeting, but we have to have time to talk to our neighbors, find out if we can all be there. We can have a meeting. We had our meeting on June 30th. They showed up with the same virtual plat of 1/3 acres, which was very disappointing to us. I'm not sure why they didn't come prepared to show us that 1/2 acre, just because 2 of us said we could not communicate that without talking to our neighbors first. And then, so they sent over the 1/2 acre parcels to us on Wednesday last week. I believe it was in the 5-6 o'clock p.m. hour. So we tried to communicate the next day. Myself and several others were out of town because it was a holiday weekend. And even though I was gone, I spent my Friday of my 25th anniversary weekend with my husband writing up an email and a proposal to counter proposal to them that we got sent back later, I think in the 7-8 o'clock time frame that evening. And so it's frustrating because everything takes a little bit of time. And then once we sent the proposal off, I heard nothing on Monday until 10 p.m. Well, I'm already in bed. I've got my stuff all written out, and then they send it. I get up this morning, I see it, and I have to go to work. I don't have the luxury. Development isn't my job. I have a business with my husband that I'm trying to run. And so I'm trying to do that all day and check applications and see what's been turned in. I start rewriting and revising some things because I'm checking to see if the 1/2 acre plots have been turned in. On my lunch hour, it had not been turned in. So I thought I was good to go. And then it's, I come to find out one of my neighbors texts me at 2 o'clock or 2:30 and she says, they've turned stuff in. So I think what I want to communicate to city council and to the staff is if you don't allow and have a set time frame of when things can be turned in or have to be turned in, we as a community struggle being involved. And I know you guys are always asking the community members be involved in your process. And it's not that we don't want to be involved. We find it frustrating for things that are like this. Any other questions?
Council, any other questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Strader.
just a comment. I also feel for you and empathize, and we can hear the frustration in your voice. I know, we have some process planning initiatives that are underway, and I think we should just take that feedback to heart. We really need to have a process that's fair for everyone. A lot of people are working families. I get it. You don't have time to be checking this at the last minute. I couldn't agree more. So thank you for staying part of the process, though, and for not giving up on it and still showing up tonight. We appreciate that.
Any other questions?
Council, any other questions? Okay. I understand we have reached the end of our people signed up at this point in time. Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to testify, or anybody who would like to testify on Zoom? You can do so by raising your hand, and the clerk will identify you.
Mr. Mayor, online, the first person to raise their hand was Denise. I'll go ahead and move her over.
Okay. Denise, if you could state your name and address for the record, please. You'll have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi, my name is Denise Lefevre. I'm at 6706 North Salvia Way. By one of the individuals that's been involved in this, they asked me if I would take a look at the application process. And I was actually quite surprised when I looked at the number of changes from P&Z to City Council. And I was trying to go back through and track the open spaces, the plat, some of the things that changed. And there was just, to me, there was just a lot of changes. And even when I listened to tonight's testimony and I listened and I watched the plats come up for the staff, the developer, I'm really, quite honestly, not sure which plat you're going to incorporate in there. The developer brought up one that has these larger these half-acre transition lots. The staff had two different plats within their own presentation. There was a really nice open space one that was done at one time that had a connection on the west side that connected the neighborhoods with a pathway for any future expansion. And those were different in the staff report. One of the things I did see, they made a lot of changes to the amenities in the open space, which, the amenities that they changed from the time it went to P&Z to the time where it is now is great. One of the concerns that I have, and it was my brainchild, the developer had said that Century Farms had less open space in it. Just a reminder that the Linear Parkway, which was added into the calculation for qualified open space, that was a change that was done after Century Farm, and that is now allowed to be in that calculation. In addition to that, when I go back and I look at that, the other thing that came up was the lateral amenities. Yes, linear parks was something that I talked about when we were on the steering committee. And I talked about using lateral areas and amenity, but this one is not really vetted out very well. We talked about making them nice amenities so they don't become weeds. You putting boulders in it, having a pathway along it, and really making it a feature in the neighborhood. This one here, from what I see, is just, it's not really well vetted out. And what I'd hate to see is just like a concrete lateral out there that doesn't have a pathway, that's not incorporated, that's not an amenity, but yet it's a way to go back through and have a calculation within the open space. So I guess when I look back at that, I mean, lot size, width changed, access changed, setbacks changed, amenities changed, open space changed. And right now, I know that one of the things that I just heard on this last conversation was there was a letter between the developer and the homeowners association, which is something that at a bare minimum, they may be agreeable to, but yet that's not incorporated into the council's decision tonight. And I'm going to leave with this. I'm still not sure what plat you guys are looking at approving. I'd like to see you guys send it back to P&Z and get all these staff reports updated.
Council, any questions for Denise? Okay, thank you very much. Up next, it looks like we have Sally Reynolds.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. I'm actually out of state. Can you hear my audio okay?
We can. Say your name and address for the record, please.
Certainly. My name is Sally Reynolds. My address is 1166 West Bacall Street in Meridian. I have served on the Meridian Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee in 2019 and am currently part of the city's Open Space and Amenities Work Group. A major finding during the comp plan process was that residents wanted increased open space. Open space contributes to the city's overall livability and economic sustainability. The open space survey substantiated this. Now, some respondents defined open space as public parks, pathways, and gathering spaces, and others said it's nature reserves or the preservation of farmland and ag practices. While not available as a survey choice, some residents often define open space as the spacing between houses, or what do they want to see when they drive down the road. There's an overall feeling that Meridian is becoming too dense, and they see open space as a way to alleviate that. So they don't necessarily want all open space to be usable by the public. They just don't want to live in a community where all they see is lines of black rooftops melding together in an unending stream of cookie cutter neighborhoods. Now, the Rustler Lane and Rock Ranch areas are two areas in Meridian that add character, variety, and open space to Meridian. They are rare estate properties with nature and farming capabilities. They are working and paying to maintain prime open space in Meridian without the city needing to maintain a city park, buy rural farmland to preserve it, or fund a nature reserve through taxpayer or developer impact fees. The Cedar Brook development is sandwiched between two low-density residential areas, which really should have been labeled ultra-low density or rural. Throughout the comp plan process, the entire steering committee, which included P&Z commissioners, was aware of this unique square mile, and as Ms. Ward quoted Commissioner Sale's comments, that was shown. Last year, residents gave copious testimonies about retaining the rural designation or at least an ultra-low density designation because we knew it was the only path to ensure proper transition between rural properties and new developments. Now, despite over 400 signatures on a petition and public testimony, that did not happen. For me, this is not a matter of has the developer offered the current residents enough or eliminated enough lots to, try and justify their 1/2 acre transitions. My question is a matter of principle. Do we believe that 1/3 to 1 acre lots are really an adequate transition from 5 acre rural estate lots? And I'm going to add a sidebar here just because of Ms. Connolly's testimony that a large single level home on a 1/2 acre lot is really going to eat up the majority of that lot, that footprints. And so what will that transition look like as residents drive down the road? Will it look like
Sally, we lost you.
condition to have at least one row of 1 acre transitional lots? It would give a less jarring transition to the MDR neighborhood and maintain that rural feel and open space that residents are so desperately asking for. The very least we can do is review this application on the case-by-case process it was promised and think of both the property rights of existing owners and the future that will be in Cedar Brook. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Just so you know, we lost your audio for about 15, 20 seconds. I don't know if you realize that or not.
I was wondering, I think it was just where I said it's one thing to have MDR right up against a berm on a housing. Was it that part that you missed?
It was right after you said, talked about a 1/2 acre home or a large home on a 1/2 acre. It went out right after that.
Okay, so I'll just read that part. It's just, so what will the transition look like as residents drive down the road? Will it look like we're waiting for these residents to move out so more MDR can be added? And I was saying it's one thing to see MDR as you're driving down the road on a berm, but it's another to see beautiful farms and then see 3 to 10 lots abutting it. So I asked if we could please add the condition to have 1 row of 1 acre lots for a less jarring transition and uphold the promise of the case-by-case basis that we had discussed previously.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that covers
the missing part. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I apologize for the audio.
Nope. I appreciate everyone working and adjusting to our technical challenges. We still try to work through things.
Certainly don't.
Thank you. Sally?
Nice to hear from you, Sally.
Wonderful to hear from all of you. Thank you, and have a great night.
Okay.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, do we have anybody else online with their hand raised?
Not at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Bongiorno.
Thank you. Mayor and City Council, since this particular map is up, I just wanted to make a clarification to Sonia's presentation. I want to make sure that's very clear that this particular sub has one way in and one way out. The two emergency accesses that are shown on the right do not fulfill the fire code. There is a third access that's not shown. That road that comes in on the east and kind of runs straight and then heads up into the corner. There is another emergency access that runs out to Victory. That was the only way that they could build this entire subdivision. So Bill Parsons and I had a couple of conversations about this particular piece of property, mainly because if Linder was shut down for some reason, no one would have had access to their property. It would have been done. So that was when we worked with Toll Brothers to get that third access that is not shown on any of the maps that goes out to Victory. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands that there is only one way in and one way out for normal traffic to this subdivision. Everything else is emergency access only. So from an emergency standpoint, it's not ideal, but it is functional. But again, you're going to have all of that traffic from that entire subdivision going through that one intersection.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Well, it does not appear that we have anybody else who is looking to testify at this time. Council, we ready to have the applicant come back up? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I will try very hard to speak up, and please let me know if you cannot hear me. I want to address to some of the comments. I'll start with school and the comments that we heard from Ms. Webb. Ms. Webb has compiled, it sounds like, from the number of lots that are proposed in preliminary plats that have been approved, but she attributes them all to taking up capacity in a single year, saying that she came up with a number of 1,540 new students just from our immediate area would be added to our area schools. Instead, the correct calculation used by the school district would be to spread that out over a 10-year period. And in fact, that calculation has been shown over time from the facility plan. If you look at the 20-year average for all schools in the entire district, 927 students have been added. And so 1,540 are not going to be added in 1 year and just in our location. So those numbers don't accurately reflect the immediate capacity demands on these schools. In our meetings with Joe Yoakum, he did indicate that he expects Blue Valley to come on in 2022, that the new classroom sizes in the Mary McPherson expansion will be larger. I want to address the timing issues, that there's been some concerns in response from the City Council. And particularly the last comments from Ms. Lefevre, just to put it in context, she talked about the number of changes in the application. I just want to be clear that except for the change in the larger perimeter lot that Toll Brothers has come forward with as a concession to the neighbors' demands, all of the other changes are requests by the Planning and Zoning Commission or city staff, where they asked for adjustments, they asked for an additional playground, they asked for additional open space, and then we were asked in the conditions of approval that were presented in the staff report before the commission to provide that before council, which we did. And so none of that is new information that wasn't already known that would be provided. It was laid out in the staff report before the commission. The new information is our effort to continue to work with the neighbors to try to evaluate whether we can expand these lots. And Toll Brothers has taken their request very seriously. The concessions that they've offered with the berming, with the installed improvements, those are significant and costly. Losing lots is costly. And they did try to share this with the neighbors as quickly as possible. As was noted, they reached out. There was a meeting. They provided the R2 example with the larger half-acre lots last Wednesday. They also provided the single-story exhibit of where they thought that the single-story homes could fit there last Thursday. The email that they sent last night was in response to Paula's email that she sent Friday night. And so they're trying very hard to update the neighbors, to respond to the neighbors' updated concerns and questions. They've worked hard to try to understand and address all of the neighbors' concerns. There was discussion about the transition and the council's comprehensive plan, discussion about transition. And as you all remember, because it was very recent, there was a proposal to require a minimum of 1 acre lots when you're transitioning to county rural residential. And the council declined to...
Mr. Mayor, sorry.
Yes.
The audio's cutting and fading out again a little bit.
Is this better?
Not yet, no.
Council members, if I stop moving so much, does that help? I talk when I move, and I move when I talk. Is that any better, or do you want me to move?
It's very faint here.
I would call it fuzzy.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe if you went into the other room.
Okay.
And there's the headline, Mayor sends people to their room.
Yeah, can you pause the timer?
Sound check, can you hear us okay?
Much better.
Okay. Whatever.
Thank you, council members, for letting me know you couldn't hear me. I was talking about the comprehensive plan update where the council declined to adopt the 1 acre minimum adjacent to rural residential. But I know that you still did care a lot about transitional. I mean, what you said at that time was that you didn't want to make that a boilerplate rule. You understood that that wouldn't fit in a lot of properties. Instead, you wanted to evaluate where transition makes sense. And you were looking to numerous factors to take into account. I mean, the language that was proposed at that time would have not required any transition if you had a buffer such as a roadway or open space intervening. Here, as I mentioned, we had a roadway we removed. We've also got the significant distance from the homes, other factors that should take into account in this case-by-case basis in current circumstances, the changes in topography, and all of the concessions that have been made, the single story, the constructed buffers, the doubled setbacks, and maybe most importantly, the fact that this property is designated as medium density residential, and we're trying to accomplish the comprehensive plan's goals. The transition that has been provided here provides that perfect mix that addresses those case-specific factors. And there was a request from several of the neighbors to put this in writing. We couldn't agree more. That's why we proposed the conditions of approval that we did in the written response to the staff report. We tried to be clear. Some of these were already part of the conditions of approval from the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we added to it to reflect the concessions that we were willing to make, that we have described to the neighbors, and that we've really heard from the neighbors.
So with that, I would stand for questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
Yeah, I think what, a comment I have or a question would be if the school district gave you context for setting their 10-year absorption period for this number of units. And the reason I'm asking is, it's just common sense. I mean, I'm looking at your development. Your development is delivering units into 2023. This is one of the biggest developments I've seen on council. Granted, I've been here for a short time, so it is my first rodeo, but I'm thinking, well, you're delivering your units in a time frame that makes sense from an internal rate of return perspective for your equity investors. So it just doesn't, I guess, did they give you context for why they would pick a 10-year period? And again, I apologize because it really shouldn't be your responsibility to explain the school district's projections. But if you have additional color on that, I'd be curious to hear it.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Strader, I'll do my best with what I know, and I don't try to speak for the school district, but we have learned from meetings from them, but also from their facilities plan. And I think that they project over the 10-year period because you don't know exactly how fast developments are going to build out. You don't even know if all preliminary platted lots will be final platted and built. You have families at different stages. And there is an in and out through the school district as well as new students come in and others leave. And so what I cited to in the facility plan, I think is sort of the ground truthing where they looked at a 20-year average and came up with 927 new students in the entire district. And so their planning for that facilities plan was to plan for 1,000 new. So they increased it somewhat. I suspect the next time they come out with a new facilities plan that may be updated further. But they are planning to accommodate that much, and that appears to be about what they're getting. I guess one other point I'd remind you, if you recall the slide we looked at earlier where we had asked the school district for their current preliminary plats, just information that you often ask for, Councilmember Strader. And when you looked at that number and applied that same formula, it was, and you divided it over 10 years, it was 1,107 students per year. So not far off from the 1,000 target. So it seems to be playing out that way in their planning and their 20-year history average and what they've got before them right now with growth. Those are the points I think that are responsive to your question, but I'd welcome a follow-up if I didn't answer you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
I guess just a comment. I think just from where I'm sitting, there is a total mismatch, and I'm missing something. Clearly, I'm missing some information. We're working on it. Our own planning staff is showing 7,500 units that are approved and entitled that I think they expect to be delivered in a 2 to 3 year time frame in the city from other information I've seen. And I guess I know we're working on this, and I'm happy that this planner is starting soon, Mr. Mayor, to help work on this. This is a big sticking point for me. I'll just be really upfront. This is a big sticking point for me, and I'm having a lot of trouble wrapping my head around a projection that I'm hearing kind of via a game of telephone, and no offense, ma'am, but from an applicant telegraphed from the school system who hasn't even done our own planning staff the courtesy of having that direct conversation. And I have an issue with that. It's not your issue specifically, but unfortunately, you're certainly going to be impacted by it from my seat, how I'm looking at it. Thanks.
And just to put, it was a district-wide number. There are definitely pockets of the district which absorb a majority of that at any point in time based upon where that number is. Could be in Eagle, could be in North Meridian, could be in South Meridian. So the absorption rate differs. It's probably not in the area around Locust Grove and Fairview right now. I think we could all agree on that. Council, any other questions for the applicant?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Kavanagh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Nelson, thanks for your update to us, kind of just articulating a little bit about the time frame. I recognize you do this on a fairly regular basis, and obviously some of the neighbors, this is something that is not a regular occurrence for them, and so I think at least you articulating that piece to me was helpful. I know that piece is something council has wrestled with a lot, and we received public testimony today, and we have really wanted to invite the public the ability to provide testimony up until the 11th hour, and maybe we've got to find a better mousetrap to allow for testimony, but for the public to be able to testify on what's going to be before council. But that's a conversation for another day. Ms. Nelson, my question was, you touched a little bit about one-story heights, and I can't recall what lots were only going to be one story. And as you probably well know, Ms. Nelson, we don't condition height in Meridian. Or we don't condition stories in Meridian. We condition height. And so getting some understanding about what that height maximum is going to be for those single stories, proposed single stories, would be helpful for me.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I probably need my development team to answer what a single story building height is, or Sonia maybe knows. Is that 35 feet? Whatever your standard is for that is what they mean by that. They're not trying to push the envelope on whatever the standard single story is. The agreement was to provide 60% along the perimeter of the R2. At staff's request, we delineated that. We selected the properties that were directly in front of the view shed of the existing homes to best improve their views. And so that's what we have proposed, 60% single story through that R2 perimeter. And I think that I do have a slide for that if that would be helpful, but we have identified exactly which lots just so it could be very clear.
And it looks like your team is kind of assembling to find that for us, so thank you. I remember seeing the slide.
There it is. One back, two back. There we go. All of the red lots are single story. And they do line up with the view angles of the existing homes looking towards the distant hills.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, question for Ms. Nelson.
Councilman Hoagland.
Ms. Nelson, while we're on that topic of the half-acre lots and the single story, what is the distance from the back of the house to the property line to the west or southwest where those half-acre lots are located?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Hoagland, those properties have significant setbacks for their homes. They range from over 200 feet to over 400 feet. I can give you specific distances. To our west, they're well over 200 feet for the Robertsons and the Reinheimers. For the Lynns, 288 feet. For the Martins, 385 feet. The Randalls, 209 feet. So that goes along the west and the southwest. So that the homes are significantly set back, which is one of the existing circumstances that we suggest is very appropriate when you're thinking about how you might provide transition.
Mr. Mayor, follow up.
Councilman Hoagland.
I want to make sure, does that include their property from the back of the house of the half-acre lot to the property line is in some instances 200 feet, or is that 200 feet from the back of their house to the back of the other house?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Hoagland, the numbers I gave you are the numbers between their house and the property line. On our property, we have agreed to increase the setback to double the required setback from 15 feet to 30 feet. You know, obviously we can't meet rural county estate planning types of setbacks, but between the two of them, they create significant distance between the homes.
Mr. Mayor, to follow up, comment and question, another question that, yeah, I thought I had heard that it was doubled to 30 feet, but then I heard these longer distances and I just wanted to be certain I knew where the longer distances took place. Earlier on, when you first did your opening, you provided for me the slide that showed the other approved developments, and there was a development that was across on the east side of Linder Road, probably to the southeast of the property. And one of my concerns has been about being on the fringe and out there, and the capacity for city services. It costs more the farther out you go. Adds to the.
Councilmember Hoagland, I think you went on mute.
Sorry about that.
Just at the end.
But now I know the feeling. Where did I leave off? Okay.
You were talking about the extension of services to this area.
Yeah, the extension of service, it just does cost more. And I found in my reading where it talked about on the west side, this is a mile to the south of, well, a mile to the north is the nearest annexed property for the city of Meridian. Can you explain to me how you don't feel that this is leapfrog development when, you know, especially in light of Deputy Chief Bongiorno's discussion of there's only one access, and there's an access to Victory, although looking at this slide, I don't see what that access is like. Typically, we prefer more orderly growth, that it's contiguous and moves outward. This jumps over, and then you've got a big gap, and in fact, it connects to nothing. So explain to me how you don't feel that's leapfrog development.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Hoagland, thank you for the question. I'd like just, I guess, on the annexation, we are contiguous to city limits across Linder from the development that the city has approved on the east side. And so we do qualify for annexation under the standards and set forth in your zoning code. As far as what you've planned, we are also within the area of impact. We are within the area that you have planned. Even as recently as a few months ago, when you updated your comprehensive plan, still calling for this area to have the medium density residential. And so this is within the area that the city plans to have developed at this density. The services here, I think, are really what makes this location so great. We are maybe closer to the fire station than any new property could be. And so not only do we have that excellent proximity, but this is going to provide the rooftops that has the property taxes that should surround your services to keep them operational. And this area, as I tried to illustrate with walking through your comprehensive plan, is centrally located between these two key interchanges. It's centrally located between these activity centers that are planned along these major corridors. The 10-mile area specific plan area is not an underdeveloped area. That area is developing with commercial and unemployment, or excuse me, with employment centers. And we can provide the homes and the residents to go and serve in those employment centers and to cater to those commercial businesses. This is exactly what you've called for here when you've thought about how to develop. And in some ways, this part of your city is closer in to your downtown core than stretching out to further reaches of your northwest and your southeast core that are becoming the furthest reaches of your city. So we understand that it is on the edge of your currently annexed property. That is just the definition of being, of seeking annexation, that we are by definition outside of your current city limits. But we do ask you to follow your comprehensive plan and what you set forth to do with this property. You've got an applicant before you that is willing to invest in this based on your comprehensive plan to provide a very nice master plan development that can happen when you have acreage available like this. It provides a great opportunity to get this kind of layout and design and mix of housing and amenities. So those are all factors I hope you'll take into account when you think about this location and this request.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Burnt, Councilmember Hoagland, can you hear me, buddy? Brad, can you hear me? He's muted. Councilman Hoagland, you're muted right now.
Yeah, I kept pushing my thing up and my mute button disappeared. So I can hear you, Councilman Burnt.
Okay, good. I'll continue. I don't doubt that this development is potentially going to look nice and has great amenities and is going to, I have no doubt the Toll Brothers would sell these homes, honestly. I do have some concerns, and I want to express these concerns before we close the public hearing, so that Deb has a chance to make comments. My first concern is rural roads, and that ACHD doesn't plan to do anything with these roads until 2031 or 35. There's obviously a concern with the lot transition between with the R2 development and the estate lots. I certainly would like to see those lots be bigger in transition. Access scares me a hair in regard to what Deputy Chief Bongiorno specified earlier. But ultimately, I agree 100% with Councilmember Hoagland and his comments about leapfrog development. Ultimately, we've created two areas within our city where we are wanting to grow, and that's in Northwest Meridian and Southeast Meridian, and obviously we're focusing on infill development as a priority as well. I don't feel like this development obviously fits in these locations. It's certainly not infill. At the end of the day, I would consider this to be fringe development, and there's a lot of problems with fringe development. So whether it be safety, whether it be a lot of different things, infrastructure, et cetera. So those are my concerns, and I'll let Deb respond. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Burnt, thanks for your comments, and I particularly appreciate the opportunity to respond. It's kind of you to put that out when the public record is open. On transportation and looking at Linder, you commented that is a rural road, but I mean, that's the benefit of this kind of development coming in, is that, we're going to improve Linder Road, building the half street on our side out to its full width, and adding the pedestrian and bike and safety, the multimodal improvements along that entire frontage. And so Linder will be, ahead of schedule in the way it's improved because of the investment from this developer. The impact fees that will be paid by this developer based on the current lot count of 322 is still over $1 million. And so that makes development pay for itself, and really leads, as needed to the infrastructure that you're referencing here. We've already touched on some of the emergency services and the proximity. We're within 5 minutes for the police response. We're 3 minutes from the fire. Those are the types of infrastructure concerns and service concerns that I think you're getting at when you're worried about fringe development, when you're asking those questions about whether or not this site is ready to be served. I think it's uniquely situated to be exactly ready to be served. It has better serviceability from your service providers than many infill locations, and not all development can be infill. It's as laudable as a goal as that is, it is still only a portion of the type of development that is going to make Meridian the great city and continue the way it is. You've got plans for a variety of housing at a variety of price points, and Toll Brothers can come in and fulfill a different niche than you have with infill development. So we ask you to look at the infrastructure that is available here, the services that are available here, and have those facts in mind when you're thinking about whether or not this truly is too far, and think about the quality of the development that could go here. So thank you for the opportunity to respond.
Thanks, Deb. Council, any other questions for the applicant?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
Debbie, I don't know who's controlling the slides right now, but the slide just prior to this one on the screen, that's the one. I think, Councilman Hoagland asked a great question, and the leapfrog development concern and from services to the site concern, I think this roadway issue is one of the bigger ones, more so than police and fire, that I think begs the question that, the property for the half mile going north is not yet annexed. So for a considerable amount of time, utilizing Linda Road, which is, 2 lanes, it'll be improved just along this project site, which is a big help, but for a good 10 to 15 years, perhaps, you have substandard transportation on Linda Road. And I think that's a unique issue. I'll just comment and let you respond, but I think that's a unique component that makes this feel more leapfrog, for lack of a better term, than other ones. Understanding that it's adjacent to the city across the street, the annexation path, but it's not necessarily flowing inside out as efficiently as it could. That sometimes that raises more challenges than in others. So in this one, we've got the long delay for Linda Road improvements all the way to Amity. The ACHD staff report references at least some concern on the sight lines. I understand it is compliant with the sight lines. I think it references 550 feet in the staff report. But this is one of the slides that I thought seemed to highlight what I heard from Councilman Hoagland and the current concern we see with leapfrog development in a less than efficient and orderly way that we grow. The comments from Deputy Chief Bongiorno seem to kind of exacerbate those concerns if for some period of time, because you don't control the properties around it, you have really everything coming in and out of Linda Road, which isn't going to be improved for a decade or so. So that's what I thought, more so than police and fire service, one of the biggest challenges that you're confronting when trying to address why this project, which is beautiful, is appropriate at this location and at this time.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Borton, thank you again for the opportunity to respond to that. I guess the key thing I'm picking up from you and I want to focus on is when you're talking about, yes, we're going to improve Linder along our site, but then there's the rest of Linder and it's a long way out in ACHD's plans. It's still going to remain a rural roadway. I guess a couple of facts that I think are just critical to understand about that. In ACHD's report, which I know you've read, they determined that Linder Road, even with our development, is still meeting level of service standards. It still has sufficient capacity. So yes, it is not yet a widened, improved road all the way through, and it doesn't need to be for some time. So I think that's the important thing to understand. We are not causing that existing infrastructure to need more improvements than what we're currently providing along our frontage. We will be providing a southbound right turn lane and all of the frontage along our property, which expedites the improvements to Linder. And where we're not providing it, as you noted, to our north, it doesn't need it to accommodate our trips. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think on that, just an interesting observation on that response, because we see so many applications that on an individual basis, every application has a staff report which says every application has road improvements that adequately address project traffic and all background traffic, which would make one believe that in every application, every project adequately addresses all traffic, but yet there's traffic problems. So that's what I think begs some of the questions on these applications. Is there's some disconnect, because everybody has a staff report which says every road can handle all the traffic that's being generated, yet we still get confronted with enormous challenges with traffic problems. That's what led some of the question on this one. Because you're right. I mean, the report does reflect exactly what you said, but it makes us scratch our heads sometimes when report after report says the road improvements as required adequately address all traffic, including background traffic, and yet here we are.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Borton, a fair question. I can tell you, though, that I've been involved with a number of applications that have had significant mitigation requirements. But I think also, maybe more to your point, it's a reflection of ACHD's fair process to adopt an impact fee. And because they adopt impact fees, then they have planned improvements that are funded with those impact fees. And case in point, we haven't gotten to this yet because we've just been talking about Linder, but the intersection to our north at Linder and Victory is currently in ACHD's CIP to be expanded to a roundabout in the 2021 to 2025 timeframe. So sooner than other improvements needed in this area. And they cause development to pay their fair share through impact fees, which here is more than $1 million. So it's not that we don't have mitigation, it's just is distributed fairly through impact fees. And because that's a programmed improvement that ACHD already has planned, I'm sure they would allocate our impact fees in that direction. And I also just want to point out that we are not the only developing property out here. I mean, there's interest from other properties in this very area to develop. And Meridian, like other areas, has a shorting of houses and a high demand for housing. The property to our immediate north, where our third emergency access point is, has had pre-application meetings with the city and expects to come in soon. So this isn't an isolated one-off. I think all of these other developers are looking at the opportunities with the existing infrastructure and services, the same corridor issues that we're highlighting that create the opportunities being between 10 Mile and Meridian. I mean, Linder is a fast developing corridor that people are excited about. And so we won't be the only ones that are looking to act on your comprehensive plan for this area.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Council, any additional questions or comments? Or do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
just two more questions. One is the school district's facility plan, and I thought I would find reference to it in some of the applications materials, but I didn't. It shows a school district site, the 66-acre high school site. It's as though they own it, and it's exactly where this project is, Grove High School. And I was surprised it didn't come up. I mean, it's on this northwest corner of Linder and Amity. Did that come up in any conversations?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Borton, yes, it did, and I failed to mention it in my trying to race through my rebuttal because in my primary testimony, I mentioned that I believe there was a high school and elementary site near, and then you indicated you saw that in the facility plan. In fact, my clients confirmed for me in discussions with Joe Borton, there is a high school and an elementary site together at 10 Mile and north of Amity, so very near this site.
Yeah.
And the school district has already acquired the land, as you noted.
Okay. That's the 66-acre parcel.
Yes.
Okay. That's all, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councilman Cedar, did you have a follow-up? Okay. Is there anything else or a motion from council?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
I'm not quite sure where this body wants to go, just in light of maybe our previous item on our agenda, opening and closing the public hearing. I don't know if council wants to discuss things a little bit before we close the public hearing. I know we've done a little of that because I don't know where things are going. Just food for thought.
Mr. Mayor, as a note, I do notice Denise has her hand raised again. I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Thank you for bringing it to our attention. I'll see if council wants to take any additional testimony from the public since we are in applicant wrap-up element.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
I personally feel that I personally have all the information necessary to make my decision, and I am perfectly happy to proceed under Councilman Kavanagh's suggestion of discussing if it makes more sense prior to closing the public hearing these days or after. Either way, that's just for me, but I don't have any further questions at this time.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Burnt.
I'm okay. I don't have any questions. I'm okay to close the public hearing. I guess I'd punt to Councilman Cavanagh or Councilmember Borton and Hogan to get their thoughts.
Mr. Mayor, I'm supportive either way. Just we do have a good history of opening and closing, or closing and reopening public hearings.
That's happened once or twice, that's for sure.
I'm fine with closing, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Borton, how about yourself?
I'm fine to proceed either way. If anyone wants to provide comment now, then by all means.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
I will give my opinion that I am at, and maybe some more color for people. And I'm sorry, I took my mask off, but man, that thing is rubbing on my ear right now, and I'm just gonna get these thoughts out and put it right back on. I personally, I'm not supportive of this application at this time. My philosophy on the comprehensive plan is that it is a long-term destination of where we are going. It doesn't mean we have to get there in a short time frame. I think we want to proceed in our priority growth areas. I do not consider this an infill development. Personally, even before I joined City Council, I had provided an opinion that I thought we still needed a rural designation, and I respect the previous council's decision not to go there, but I do feel that a 1 acre transition makes sense when you're talking about properties that are of this size. I am very frustrated about the just confusion with West Ada School District. I'll just leave it at that. We really need to work on that and get on the same page. I do know, common sense tells me that these developments are not coming in 10 years. They're coming in 2 to 3 years. It just doesn't make sense to me. Even our own information that we have doesn't align well with that. So I'd encourage a further dialogue with the school district. I also feel like it's really also the roads for me. That really resonated with me. I don't feel like these rural roads are ready for a development of this size. And with that development from ACHD so far into the future, I think we need to wait. To me, it's not the right time. I have no doubt that this developer would do an absolutely beautiful job. But we're a debt-free city. We don't need to rush. We can afford to take our time. And I don't think, I don't support moving forward on this one because I don't feel that it's orderly growth. That's it for me.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
happy to chime in with my opinions. I'm not in love with this project as presented. I think Councilmember Strader touched on what I think is a big component of this project, which are those 1 acre lots that have got to be there to provide that transition. And I know that was something a council member who did approve the previous comprehensive plan, that was something that I was really, really sensitive to, is our folks that they haven't been part of the Meridian city limits, but have been part of Meridian for a long time, and as the city continues to grow, that we provide a meaningful transition. I appreciate what the applicant's done to try and mitigate that. I just think there's more to do. That said, I guess I talk a lot about creative approach in building community. And this application does it for me. This is a place where I think anyone in Meridian would be proud to call home. I appreciate the concern about the roads. But with the increasing demands in road construction in Ada County, specifically Star, Cuna, South Boise, growth is going to be the places that are going to drive roadway improvements. And so we can continue to wait for the roads to be improved out there, and I think we'll be waiting for a long period of time. In our previous application, we talked about Linder and Franklin and what that's going to look like in 10 to 20 years. And I guess I'm looking at this place as well as what it's going to look like in 10 to 20 years. And with the Linder Road overpass, those road improvements will quickly follow. The biggest hang-up is that million-dollar question that nobody seems to have a clear answer on is the impact on our schools. Candidly, I think the phasing plan is a little aggressive for the impact on our schools. If council indicates there's some support to approve this application, I would be supportive of having a conversation about what that phasing plan looks like so that we're not overburdening our schools. But overall, I think that this is a really well thought out application for our community.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
I do have to say, this will be a very nice development someday, but not today. There's disagreement with the folks out there right now over half acre versus acre. Those are things that we could probably fix with, well, what's the berm going to look like? What's the fence going to look like? How much landscaping, and do some things like that. But overall, and I know Ms. Nelson, talked about the meeting, the intent of the annexation is contiguous across the street. And there's intent, and then there's the spirit of the law. And it just, when I first went through this and reading about it, that just kept bugging me, was it's just too soon for this location right here. And there's been some good discussion about the road systems. I think of one roundabout where Ada County Highway District has put in the roundabout. It's there. I'm sure they're proud of it over there in the Oaks area on McMillan Road. And semi trucks are to Walmart and back on these rural roads. And it really doesn't work. Yeah, we had a nice roundabout there, but roads are unimproved. There's no sidewalks. It's very tight, congested. And the same thing would happen here with a roundabout without, and there's future development there. There's setbacks are going to be there. Everything's going to be there. but the money's not there to do it yet. So, and that's a concern with this going out here at that location. I know there's future applications will probably come in for some of the land to the north. And as that comes in, I just feel that's a more orderly way to go instead of approving this out here and then possibly having something to the northwest tag into that corner and then something further to the west. And all of a sudden you have this lot of property in the middle that's going to be infill someday. And we have a lot of that in Meridian here and there. And as a council, we face those challenges of trying to fit infill development with existing development. And it's really hard. So I'd prefer to see more orderly growth coming out to this. It is a good project. I have no doubt that it would be a very, very nice development, but I think it's just a little ahead of its time at this location.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
I'm not going to go into much detail. I've already given my thoughts, but to be quite simple, I think that I'm picking up what Councilmember Hoagland's putting down. His thoughts are exactly my thoughts. I couldn't have expressed them clear, so.
Council, are we at a place where you'd like to close the public hearing or other direction? I don't want to deprive Mr. Borton of speaking, but Councilman Kavanagh.
Mr. Mayor, I move we close the public hearing on item H-2020-0012.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay? Those opposed, nay? The ayes have it.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Kavanagh.
appreciate the thoughtful comments from my colleagues. Appreciate the application. I think I've got a good sense about where the council lies on this. And so with that, Mr. Mayor, I move that we deny item 5C, application H-2020-0012, for the following reasons. Lack of transition between the neighbors, concern about emergency access, longstanding impacts to the school district, roadway challenges, and overall inconsistency with Meridian's growth plan.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Borton?
Aye.
Kavanagh?
Aye.
Strader?
Aye.
Hoagland?
Aye.
Burnt?
Aye.
All ayes. Motion passes. Council, we are to item number 6 on the agenda, future meeting topics. Is there anything for this item? If not, I would take another motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
I move that we adjourn the meeting this evening.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay?
Aye.
The ayes have it, and we are adjourned.